Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel in comments below. We love to know what you want to hear next.
Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 181. Computational Canon of Supreme Mystery. In Qin Mu's team, other than him being an imperial academician, there was no directorate. Gu Linwan's reason was that since Qin Mu was an imperial academician and had a high official position, he should lead a team by himself. The scholars that were assigned to Qin Mu may be selectively chosen. The top-notch of scholars' residents, however, they were far inferior compared to the scholars selected from Royalties Park and Divine Arts residents. With strongest practitioners lying everywhere in Imperial College, there was no lack of experts. Gu Linwan making Qin Mu lead a team for experience was obviously using public office to avenge his personal grudge. The scholars going with Qin Mu to the front lines were all acquaintances. They were Chen Wanyun, Monk Yun Ke, Yu Qinghong who brought Wolf Slave along, Si Yunxiang, and finally, Qin Yu. However, since Qin Yu was the younger generation of the capital city's Qin family, he had a deep background and found Gu Linwan to give him a word. Thus he was relocated from Qin Mu's team to another team which was led by a directorate, avoiding Qin Mu's sure death team. Qin Mu finished refining a furnace of scarlet fire spirit pills and stretched his body. He had been refining pills these few days to ensure that the Dragon Qilin would have enough to eat when they reached the front lines. Thus he had no time to meet those few scholars. Monk Yun Ke found Chen Wanyun and Yu Qinghong to discuss with them. This time Grand Chancellor made Academician Qin bring us out for experience and to a place of turmoil. I reckon we won't make it back and will surely die. We don't even have a divine arts practitioner in our team. Chen Wanyun shook his head. We have. The few of them looked towards him. Chen Wanyun smiled faintly. I have been suppressing my realm these few days, so you guys can be at ease. I can break through any time and become a divine arts practitioners of Six Directions realm. Yu Qinghong said, I've heard that the sects that rebelled have already started gathering towards the south, wanting to completely rid Eternal Peace Empire's power in the south. Numerous sects that were active near the capital city had all vanished without a trace. For example, Dragon Rider sect, which had already moved to the south. Now the south of Surging River is completely the territory of the rebel army. With all the rebel sects gathered there, how many divine arts practitioners are there? With you being the only divine arts practitioners, they're absolutely no usefulness. Chen Wanyun frowned. Academician Qin's experience in the martial world is too shallow. He's too young, so how many times has he traveled throughout the martial world? With him leading us, everything points to disaster. No matter how high my cultivation is, I would be helpless. Junior Sister Si, you haven't been talking. What's your opinion on this? Si Yunxiang smiled shyly and didn't say a word. Everyone fell silent. Monk Yun Ke sighed. It's better for us to choose one or two divine arts for escaping from floor of heavenly records. It might just be of use. The day finally came for departure. In front of Hall of Supreme Learning, a few hundred scholars gathered and the directorates inspected their own teams. Ships then flew in one after another and landed in front of Hall of Supreme Learning. The directorates then led their teams to board their own ships. Academician Qin, didn't you hire a ship? Gu Linwan walked over with a beam on his face. This journey this time is pretty far, and if you were to walk there, you would need to walk for 10 days and more. You're an imperial academician. Don't tell me you don't even bear to spend this little money. Qin Mu smiled with a calm composure. Thank you, Grand Chancellor, for troubling yourself with our matter. I got nothing but money. Therefore, I have hired a fast ship with a high price which would reach very soon. The furnace of the ship is forged by me. It's very fast. Chen Wanyun and the rest looked at one another in the eyes and thought, he's indeed petty. Even the furnace is made by himself. I reckon it's a small ship. However, he actually knows how to forge artifacts. He has never been to Hall of Divine Craft, so where did he learn to forge from? There's Hall of Divine Craft in Imperial College, and they taught how to forge artifacts and treasures. The directorates of Hall of Divine Craft were also holding official positions in the Imperial Court. The supervisors of the shipyards and the armaments manufacturers were positions the directorates of Hall of Divine Craft must assume. Ever since Qin Mu entered Imperial College, He had not even been to Hall of Divine Craft once, therefore it was impossible for him to learn any knowledge on forging. Not long later, the ships started to fly up and left Imperial College on their own. Monk Yun Kei and the rest became anxious as they waited, and suddenly, they saw a dilapidated ship sailing over shakily in the sky and landed in front of Hall of Supreme Learning Wobbly. "Our ship is here." Qin Mu smiled. Chen Wanyun, Yun Kei, Yu Qinghong all frowned hugely. This ship was already filled with holes and air was leaking out from everywhere. Furthermore, the mast of the ship was also broken and there wasn't even a sail. A burly man with bare arms appeared on the ship and had a fierce look on his face. With one look, they knew he wasn't any good person. He was covered in tattoos and he waved towards Qin Mu while laughing. "Old brother Qin, I'm late. I'm late." Qin Mu brought Hu Linger and the Dragon Qilin forward with a smile. "It's fine even if you're 1 or 2 days late. What happened to your ship? It was still fine the last time I saw you. How did it become like this in just a few days? Don't talk about it. I did another trip and met those bitches of Three Wonders Castle again. They released their insects to harm me, but my speed was too fast. Thus we crashed into the swarm of insects and almost turned my treasure ship into a sieve." Fan Yunxiao chuckled as he looked at Chen Wanyun and the rest. "Scholars, when you become officials in the future, please take care of me. I have turned good recently." Yun Kei muttered. "With this ship being so dilapidated, will it fall apart when we fly into the air?" Qin Mu also had the same suspicions. This cloud-chasing pirate ship was simply too worn out and looked like it might fall apart any time. It won't." Fan Yunxiao patted his chest forcefully and assured. "My brothers have already used runes to fortify the ship's body, thus it's extremely durable. Old brother Qin, can you help me forge an iron shell ship when you're free? You can help me refine 2 more furnaces and use black iron to forge the body of the ship. Wood is simply too brittle." Qin Mu pondered for a moment and replied, "That would require quite a high price. Just the black iron alone is a pretty large expense. Can you take out that much money? Furthermore, do you have the blueprints?" Fan Yunxiao rubbed his hands forcefully and said, "After robbing everywhere for these few days, after doing business everywhere, I've saved quite a sum of money. If I add all my property together, it should be enough to make an iron shell ship. As for the blueprints, that wouldn't be easy to get. Everyone, please board the ship. We'll talk after we board the ship." Everyone boarded the ship and Yu Qinghong looked around. The mates of the ship were all covered in tattoos and looked fierce. Some even had scars on their bodies and some were missing a nose or an eye. With malicious aura leaking out from their bodies, they obviously didn't look like good people. This dilapidated ship gradually rose into the ship and slowly drove out of the capital city like an old bull pulling onto a dilapidated cart. Everyone looked at this situation and were even more dejected. Chen Wanyun whispered, "The people on this ship aren't good guys. They're villainous people who rob people and they have extremely high abilities. Most of them are divine arts practitioners. Academician Qin has a shallow experience of the martial world and I reckon he must have fallen into the bandits' trap. We have to be careful on this journey so that we won't be robbed." Just as he said that, the dilapidated ship suddenly increased its speed and gave off a mournful whoosh as it broke through the air. Violent tremors came as the speed of the ship surpassed the speed of sound, crossing miles of distance in an instant. The few barrels of wine were flung away and exploded mid-air as they got smacked by the air. Everyone immediately stabilized themselves and looked at their surroundings in aghast. They saw this dilapidated ship soon passing by all the ships which had already set sail a while ago, leaving these ships in the dust. The speed of this ship was so unimaginable. With this speed, they could reach Surging River in just a day or 2. Qin Mu was long used to it. After all, he was the one who had forged the furnace. Therefore, there was no need to be astonished. It's fine. It won't fall apart." Fan Yunxiao consoled everyone and said, "I originally thought it would fall apart as well, but after ferrying passengers for a few trips, it has never fallen apart. It's likely not to fall apart this time." Whoosh! A peace deck board was lifted up by the gales and flew backward with a whoosh. Fan Yunxiao was full of confidence. "Don't worry. It won't fall apart. Second brother. Bring a deck up. Bring one more up. Another one was blown away. Relax. Relax. I'm experienced. Suddenly, the ship passed a raining region. It was currently raining there as the ship passed through the downpour, turning Fan Yunxiao's body all colorful. Hu Linger cried out in astonishment. Old Xiao, your tattoos got washed off by the rain. The other bandits on cloud-chasing pirate ship also had their tattoos blurred by the rain, and there was even a mate who shouted, Big brother, my scar got washed off by the rain. Fan Yunxiao was also slightly embarrassed and said, When you disembark later, we can find painters to paint it back on again. However, we've all turned good. It seems there's no need for us to paint tattoos anymore. Second brother, take off your eye patch, you see, you've scared those few scholars. The second mate took off his eye patch and revealed a perfectly fine eye. Monk Yun K muttered, The appearance of these bandits doesn't look too reliable. However, Qin Mu was very close to the head of the bandits and took out a computational cannon to consult Fan Yunxiao. Hu Linger found a handkerchief and wiped the dragon's head on Fan Yunxiao's back, and the dragon's head instantly disappeared. Fox, stop fooling around. Fan Yunxiao waved his hand. Hu Linger pouted her lips. I thought they were real tattoos, so they were painted on. Fan Yunxiao gave a dry laugh and muttered, How painful is that? Our body, hair, and skin are given to us by our parents. How can we anyhow draw on them? Qin Mu said, Senior brother Fan, the Shi by Qian, Wan in computational canon of supreme mystery is not a problem. However, Yi Zhao Jing, Gai Zi Rang Go Jian, Zhang Zai Ji. These numerals are really too huge. What are they used to calculate? Is there a need for such huge numerals? I've also asked Dao Master before, and Dao Master said they were used for immeasurable calculation. Fan Yunxiao said, Between Wan and E is the Wan system. Wan becomes E. After E is the E system. E becomes Zhao. E Zhao becomes Jing. E Jing becomes Gai. Other than that, there's also no end to division. What's used after single number is Fon, Li, Hao, Si, Hu, Wei, Xian, Sha, Chun, Ai, Miao, Mo, Hu, Kun, Sun, Siu, Shun, Shi, Tanji, Cha Na, Luda, Kong Su, Qing Jing. What they used are decimals. Fon is 1/10, Li is 100th, so on and so forth. Qin Mu was astonished and asked, Then what's Kong Su and Qing Jing used to calculate? To calculate the smallest particle in vital qi. Fan Yunxiao continued, The 14th writing of Dao Sword requires runes to be imprinted in the smallest particles of the vital qi. It was impossible to cultivate it without calculation. Qin Mu was dumbstruck and felt his head aching as he looked at the computational canon of supreme mystery. If you forge all kinds of treasures, you also need to use these calculations, and the slightest error could result in a world of difference. Qin Mu acknowledged and exclaimed in admiration, Dao Sek's attainment in algebra sure is extraordinary. He consulted sincerely, and Fan Yunxiao told him everything that he knew. Fan Yunxiao had already cultivated to the 5th writing of Dao Sect and had an extremely high attainment in algebra. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 182. Tip of the iceberg in the southern border. Cloud-chasing pirate ship flew for over a day and finally reached Surging River. The ship sailed up to the camp at the southern bank. Lizhou Prefecture had set up a massive military force along the river. The army had linked over 200 river camps, and there were numerous soldiers and horses. When they reached here, a fierce battle had just ended and there were ships rampaging on the river surface. Some ships were already destroyed and thick smoke billowed out from the burning masts and deck. Corpses floated on the river surface. There were soldiers scattering fishing nets on the ship, fishing the corpses out. They then hooked the corpses with hooks and hung them at the aft of the ship, intending to bury them after dragging them to shore. Qin Mu opened his green heaven's eyes and looked towards the opposite shore of the river. There was a dilapidated city on the opposite shore, and there were still sporadic fightings because there were still all kinds of rays bursting forth from divine arts. However, they were only skirmishes. It should be the army of Eternal Peace Empire eradicating the enemies in the city. Fan Yunxiao slowed down the ship and gradually descended down towards the camp. There was a soldier who flew up to the ship to inquire, and when he knew they were the scholars of Imperial College, he immediately waved his flag and made the archers below lower their bow and arrow. The ship gradually landed in the camp and Fan Yunxiao looked towards the sporadic fightings on the opposite shore with one black eye and one white eye. He then took a glance at Chen Wanyun, Yun Ke and the rest before shaking his head. Old brother Qin, these scholars will only hold you back and not be of much help. With a battle of this scale, the few of you scholars are completely no help and it'll be difficult for you guys to survive. I'm leaving. When I find enough black iron and blueprint of the treasure ship, I'll come and find you again. After he was done, he made the bandits on the boat activate the furnace and flew away. Yun Ke and the rest were demoralized and Chen Wanyun sneered. This person's ability isn't bad, but there's a problem with his judgment. A general walked over and asked, "Are you scholars from Imperial College?" Qin Mu nodded his head and said, "Is Lizhou Prefecture young magistrate at the front lines? May I trouble you to inform her? Just tell her River Dike County Qin Mu request for a meeting." That general was astonished and didn't dare to neglect his words as he hurried away. Not long after, the clanking sounds of armor sounded out and everyone looked towards the source of the sounds. They saw a female general clad in armor walking over with a helmet under her underarm. She had a heroic look and her facial features were also extremely beautiful. Her face powder, eyebrow liner and red lips were unforgettable. She should have just come back from the battlefield and there were still bloodstains on her body. So it's little brother Qin Mu. Yuan Chuyu's gaze fell on Qin Mu and her eyes lighted up. The little brother who walked out of River Dike County a few months ago has made a name for himself. I've heard my elder brother mentioning about you and now you're considered to have stood above others. I'm also happy for you. Big sister, you flatter me. Qin Mu blushed with shame and said, I didn't tell big sister before that I was actually from Great Ruins. Yuan Chuyu said, when you had left, I was still thinking when there was a Qin family in River Dike County which could groom such an outstanding child. My elder brother sent a letter over and mentioned you later, and only then I knew you were from Great Ruins. Yun Ke, Yu Qinghong and the rest were secretly astonished. Lizhou Prefecture was the place of lodging for all imperial scholars that came out for experience. Never did they expect that Qin Mu was actually well acquainted with Lizhou Prefecture young magistrate. Being the high official of such a place, she was already the commander of the borders. In addition to that, Yuan Chuyu had an extraordinary background. She was the princess of Yuan Empire back then, and the other crown prince of Yuan Empire was Yuan Chuyu, who had become the great general in the capital city. Qin Mu was clearly the abandoned person of Great Ruins. How did he get affiliated with Yuan Chuyu? Big sister Chuyu. What happened to Corpse Immortal Cult? Qin Mu asked. Corpse Immortal Cult has already been eradicated by me, but there are still some remnants that have escaped to the southern borders. Yuan Chuyu brought them to the city walls and said, the rebel army from everywhere have already gathered in the southern borders. There are also rebel sects from everywhere. All sorts of forces meet and mingle together here. However, this is just the tip of the iceberg and the current situation doesn't look good. Tip of the iceberg? Everyone was stunned for a moment. Yuan Chuyu smiled. In the world today, do you know who is loyal and who is a traitor? For example, me. I'm the princess of the vanquished Yuan Empire. How would you know that I would not rebel the next moment? Chen Wanyun and the rest broke out in cold sweat, afraid that this heroic-looking female general would kill them in the next instant and announce that she would rebel. Yuan Chuyu said indifferently, Imperial Court's relation to the old generations is too close. Imperial Preceptor wants to create a brand new generation on top of this foundation, but all he could use were always the power of the old generation. His new generation could not break free from the influence of the old generation, therefore, who knows which sect or which official would rebel next? Monk Yun Ke asked while shivering. But Lord Magistrate won't rebel, am I right? Yuan Chuyu looked at him and gave a bone-chilling smile as she said softly, you can make a guess. If you're right, you cannot die. Yun Ke turned ashen-faced as he was scared witless. Yuan Chuyu, this commander, had nurtured a great grandeur around her. Even though she was a woman, her cold expression could crush a person with terror. Yuan Chuyu gave a gentle laugh and summoned a general over. After giving her instructions, the general immediately deployed an army with about 1,000 men. Yuan Chuyu walked down the city halls and strode onto the river surface. Behind her, 1,000 soldiers also strode over and stepped on the river surface as they moved to the opposite shore. Qin Mu caught up with her and stood on the river surface. Vital chi burst forth under his feet, which held him up stably as he smiled. "Big sister, don't scare him." Chun Wanyun and the rest also hurried over and executed their own vital chi to let themselves not sink into the water. They could sprint on water, but to walk calmly on water, it was slightly strenuous. Other than controlling the water, they also needed to have a dense cultivation. Uan Chuyu was slightly interested. "Little brother think I won't rebel against the imperial court?" Qin Mu shook his head. "Because this rebellion is a setup by imperial preceptor to purge the imperial court and the ordinary people. Big sister is a wise person and could see that very clearly. If Big sister was dumb, you would have rebelled long ago and not wait until today." Yuan Chuyu smiled. "You're right and also wrong. The reason why I didn't rebel is not that I was clever enough. There were quite a number of people who came forward and urged me to rebel. They were all full of confidence when they came over, thinking they would definitely make me rebel. However, they were all wrong. My Yuan family doesn't value our royal position. We value our people of Yuan. When Yuan Empire was still around back then, Eternal Peace Empire had already become great and they could wage a war over any time. My father knew if a war was to break out, the empire would definitely be ruined and the families would be torn apart. However, Imperial Preceptor came to Yuan and discussed the path with my father. Back then, all the civil and military officials were there, and what they discussed was how to govern an empire and their people. My brother and I were also at the imperial court. Then we lost." Her expression remained calm as she said, "We suffered a crushing defeat, which we accepted wholeheartedly, of the debate on the path of governing an empire and the path of people's welfare. My father relinquished the title of the emperor and allowed my elder brother to succeed him, but my elder brother didn't accept it and passed the title to me. She gave a smile. No now knew if she was mocking herself or if it was a genuine smile. "I had told Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, I'm inferior to you in governing an empire and I'm also inferior to you in looking after the people's welfare. In that case, I'll hand you an empire to you. If your governance and people's welfare is not to my satisfaction, I will rebel against you in the future." Imperial Preceptor agreed and let me govern Yuan, which is also the current Lizho. "So that's how it is," everyone suddenly realized. Hu Linger cried out astonishingly, "Sister, so you were actually a female emperor?" Yuan Chuyu smiled and said, "Being a female emperor for a day, I can tell you, that's no fun. If you want to be an emperor, you can just find any place and proclaim yourself as the emperor. The only problem is how many people you can have jurisdiction over." She looked at the billowing smoke and fire on the river surface and retracted her gaze. She then smiled as she looked at Chun Wanyun and the rest. "It's your fortune you guys are able to follow little brother. His abilities are very extraordinary." Yu Qinghong and Yun Ke looked at each other and didn't know how this female general saw Qin Mu's abilities as extraordinary. Yuan Chuyu remembered the time when she had discovered the red corpse beetles scattered throughout the entire mountain at the north of Tiger Sun County. Other than the red corpse beetles, there was also a skeleton which had its flesh and blood melted away, leaving only the bones and the clothes. From the clothes, she could determine that it was an expert of corpse immortal cult. Even though she couldn't see who this expert of corpse immortal cult was, from the method of controlling the corpse beetles and amount of corpse beetles, that expert's cultivation had probably already reached 7 stars realm. Corpse immortal cult was proficient in corpses and poison, thus their cultivation realm was not that high. But when one clashed with corpse immortal cult, even people with a higher cultivation and battle prowess than them would find it very hard to defeat them. Yet this expert of corpse immortal cult had died from being poisoned, and the one that poisoned him would have been this little brother beside her who looked honest and naive. Back then, this little brother had even deceived her, making her write a travel permit for him and recommended him to go to the capital city. In Yuan Chuyu's heart, for Chun Wanyun and the rest to be able to follow such a crafty fellow out for experience, they would be even safer than if they had followed the directorates. Therefore she had said it was the fortune of Chun Wanyun and the rest. When they reached the opposite shore, the buildings in this city on the opposite shore had already collapsed, killing God knows how many people. Yuan Chuyu led the army into the city and said, Just now I said this was just the tip of the iceberg. There is still another reason other than that. Look at this. Taking down Deer County was a walk in the park. We easily invaded and took over this place, so aren't the rebel army a little too weak? Qin Mu was slightly stunned. Enticing the enemies to enter deeply? This is not only enticing the enemies to enter. The old foxes haven't even made their moves. Wu Chuyu's gaze flickered. The three old monsters that injured Imperial Preceptor still haven't appeared. The old monsters of the old generation might not just be the three of them. There are Passion-Parting Palace Master Chiojie, the three castle lords of Three Wonders Castle, high officials that have rebelled, Dragon King of Dragon Rider sect, and as well as other strong practitioners of the cult master level, and none of them have appeared yet. Other big and small cult masters, sect masters, are all very quiet. Furthermore, she said in a low voice, who knows if there are any gods that had survived from the old generation? Qin Mu gave a few cold shudders. Chen Wanyun and the rest also felt their blood run cold. Wu Chuyu obviously knew many things about the old generation, but she didn't delve into details. You guys can be at ease. These old monsters wouldn't easily make their move on the younger generation like you. Their target is Imperial Preceptor and the first-ranking high officials of the Imperial Court. Deer County was seized by a sect not much bigger than Corp's immortal cult, which is called Nine Specters sect. Now that the rebellion in Deer County has just been quelled, and there are still some remnants from Nine Specters sect escaping, I'll give you an easy task. Eradicate all of the remnants. Her gaze shone brightly as it landed on Qin Mu and the rest. Nine Specters sect is proficient in dressing up as God and playing the devil. They say they could invite supernatural beings forward to assist them in battle, therefore you guys have to make some preparations. When the other scholars are here, you guys will go forward to eradicate them. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 183. Sudden Attack from the Netherworld. Proficient in dressing up as God and playing the devil? Can invite supernatural beings forward to assist them in battle. Qin Mu was slightly stunned, and he suddenly thought of Soul Guide and Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command. These two spells were spells that were related to souls and supernatural beings which were found by him on the first level of floor of Heavenly Records. Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command was from Great Mountain sect, and as for Soul Guide, it was from Nine Specters sect. These two spells were placed in the first level of floor of Heavenly Records because there were lesser people who would cultivate spells that deviated from the average. They were spells that belonged to the soul category, yet they didn't have much offensive power. Especially for Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command, this spell declared that it could dispatch ghost gods, yet when Qin Mu tried it a few times, it was at the most similar to the 5 ghosts transfer technique. However, it was much complicated. When Qin Mu found these two spells, he had once made Chancellor Ba Shan give him pointers. However, Chancellor Ba Shan also despised these two unpopular spells and didn't study them before, therefore he had thrown them back to him and told him to comprehend them himself. Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command might be similar to 5 ghosts transfer technique, but the runes were obviously much more complicated and required one to refine a talisman treasure. This talisman treasure was much more complicated than the one Qin Mu saw in Roland's Golden Palace. It was a completely different sphere and had 1,024 irregular surfaces. On each surface had a complicated rune. Meanwhile, Roland's Golden Palace's talisman treasure only had 14 surfaces. It was exactly because Qin Mu saw the runes in Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command being complicated. He had thought this divine art was very powerful. Never did he expect its effect was only equivalent to 5 ghosts transfer technique. He felt that Great Mountain sect might have somewhat concealed the technique. However, this sect had vanished from this world and no longer existed. Meanwhile, Qin Mu had also cultivated Soul Guide from Nine Specters sect, but he had not tried out if he could succeed in guiding the souls of the dead back from the netherworld. The two spells had some runes that were similar, and both of them should be spells related to the soul category. Qin Mu bought some yellow joss paper, cinnabar, and spent 2 days to create talisman treasure for Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command before spending another day to write down the runes needed for Soul Guide as well, comparing the both together. Comparing them with each other, Qin Mu finally could confirm that both Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command had mistakes. There were some runes among them that were purposely written wrongly. These sects were not willing to hand the spells of their own sects to the Imperial Court. Therefore, they had purposely written a few runes wrongly. lowering the power of the spell drastically or even making it unusable. The runes for Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command needed an extremely high amount of runes, so even when there were over a dozen mistakes, there were still over 1,000 correct runes. This was a huge treasure vault of knowledge. With this knowledge, Qin Mu could fix the wrong runes in Soul Guide. There were over 600 types of rune arrangements the Soul Guide required, and Qin Mu fixed the wrong runes that he had spotted. When he found that there was no mistake anymore, he immediately called a soldier over to ask, "Are there corpses in the city? I would like to test my spell." That soldier asked, "Lord requires the corpses of 9 specters sect to test your spell?" The corpses of 9 specters sect were all buried, so if you need them, they'll have to be dug up. Qin Mu's face changed slightly and hurriedly asked, "Where were they buried?" That soldier replied, "We buried some in the disorderly burial mounds beside Riverside County, and the others were buried in Deer Mountain beside Deer County. We just buried the corpses that we fished out a few days ago at wherever that was close." Qin Mu's mind pounded and he hurriedly said, "Where's the young magistrate? Quickly inform the young magistrate and let her order the whole army to be on guard before sending soldiers to the disorderly burial mounds and Deer Mountain to burn the corpses." The soldier didn't understand what he meant, but he still ran out in a hurry while shouting. Young magistrate had gone over to River Dike County at the opposite shore to soothe the people. "I'll head over right now to inform her. Big Sister Chuyu is at River Dike County? This is bad." Qin Mu summoned another soldier over and told him to inform the guards to be on alert before immediately finding Chan Wanyun, Yu Qinghong and the rest, and told them quickly, 9 specters sect might be making a comeback. Quickly be on alert." Chan Wanyun, Yu Qinghong and the rest were all beyond bewildered. Monk Yun Ke asked, "The people of 9 Spectre sect are almost all eradicated and only a few people are left escaping for their lives. Why do we have to guard against these few people? They are faking their death." Just as Qin Mu said that, suddenly, a faint singing came from the river surface. This singing voice sounded ancient and obscure, as if it was a god of the netherworld summoning the souls of the dead back. It gave people the feeling that a hazy and imposing god had opened the gate to the other world, sending the souls of the dead back from the netherworld. Qin Mu's face changed hugely and his footsteps sprinted like he was flying as he broke through the air, landing on the north gate of the city tower. The north gate of the city was empty and there were only a few soldiers patrolling. Lizhou Prefecture's huge army had just experienced a huge battle, therefore, most of them were nursing themselves. Qin Mu looked towards the river surface and only saw a Taoist with a straw hat standing on a ship's mast in the center of surging river. He was currently casting spells and singing on the river, and a huge rune gave off a green glow as if there were numerous green snakes wiggling in the sky. Yun Ke and the rest came running over and stood beside Qin Mu to look towards the river surface. Chan Wanyun asked, "What is happening?" Before he could even finish his words, he fell into a daze when he saw black fog surging over from the river. The area which the black fog had shrouded became larger and larger, wider and wider. Among the darkness, a towering gate could be seen at the heart of the river, floating above the water. In the blink of an eye, the sky turned dark. Qin Mu looked towards the opposite shore and could faintly see a few ships that were ferrying the scholars sailed over. He then saw the darkness shrouded the scholars' ships. There was also a scholar's ship which had reached the sky above surging river, which was also shrouded by the darkness. Shouts of anger and cries of astonishment sounded out from the ship, making it obvious they had met something unexpected weird. He turned his head towards Deer Mountain on the left of River Dike County. River Dike County suddenly burst open as small figures rushed into the mid-air, pouncing towards their location. The few soldiers who were guarding the west city gate of Deer County couldn't react in time and were fixed in place by the yellow talismans used from the few figures that came flying over, slaughtering them on the spot. Boom! The west city gate blew wide open and the corpses rushed into the county city, slaughtering the guards who had yet reorganized themselves. These corpses were indeed corpses, but the corpses still had the souls of the dead. The Taoist on the river cast a spell and used Soul Guide to summon the souls of all the dead people in 9 Spectres sect, allow their souls to return to their body and commence a sudden attack on the guards of Deer County. These corpses were all worn out. There were some that only had a piece of skin attaching their heads to their bodies, while some had a huge hole opened up in their chests. Some were missing their limbs, and they all looked terrifyingly sinister. They were indeed dead, but their souls were pulled back from the netherworld and returned to their bodies. Thus their abilities were still the same as if they were alive. Even Chen Wanyun was stunned at this sight as he stood on the city tower not knowing what to do. Qin Mu looked towards Riverside County on the opposite shore, which was already shrouded by the black fog. Only the explosions of divine arts could be faintly heard. Abandon the city. We'll head to the east gate. Qin Mu made his decision. Chen Wanyun and the rest jolted back to their senses, and Qin Mu sprinted along the city walls while shouting for the dragon Qilin and Hu Linger to return. Turmoil had already broken out in Deer County City as everyone was caught unprepared and got killed by those corpses that were revived by Nine Spectres sect. The Army of Eternal Peace Empire was used to cultivate skills of combined assault. By cultivating the same spell or sword skill, 10 or more soldiers would just need to group up and work together closely for them to be able to even kill opponents a realm higher than them. These kind of battle techniques were extremely useful in a large-scale battle, which could be said that killing enemies was as easy as smashing rotten wood, resulting in an utter defeat for the sects which dared to resist. However, this battle in Deer County City also exhibited the disadvantages of this battle technique. Nine Spectres sect revived corpses to slaughter their way in the city, scattering these soldiers before they could organize themselves. Fighting on their own, the ability of these soldiers was much inferior to the disciples of the sects in the martial world. Thus it was almost a one-sided massacre. The sky turned darker and darker. After these disciples of Nine Spectres sect were revived, the darkness was like daylight to them. They could see everything clearly, and they were not afraid of death. They were originally corpses, thus they couldn't feel any pain and had no need to defend against the opponent's move. They could just pounce over and kill people directly. Furthermore, Nine Spectres sect as a sect, there was no lack of experts. Even the strong practitioners of Celestial Being Realm and Life and Death Realm were also revived. This kind of reviving wasn't a real reviving and was just using spells to summon the souls of the dead back. These souls of the dead would still have to return to Netherworld, but in this period of time, it was enough for them to sweep away all the guards in Deer County. The guards of Deer County are finished. Qin Mu's heart sunk, and when he saw Hu Linger and the dragon Qilin rushing over, only then did he let out a sigh of relief. Everyone immediately jumped off the East City Gate and ran away from the city in the darkness. Behind, the East City Gate suddenly collapsed as it got shattered into pieces by the strong practitioners of Celestial Being Realm. Qin Mu turned his head to look back and saw a general of Celestial Being Realm being torn apart by a few strong practitioners of Nine Spectres sect that got revived. There were still a few Taoists that were executing the yellow joss papers and walking in the sky. This made Qin Mu's heart sink. These few Taoists were the remnants of Corpse Immortal Cult. With the alliance of Corpse Immortal Cult and Nine Spectres sect, one of them would control corpses while the other would control souls. There probably wouldn't be much soldiers in the city left. Academician Qin, we should cross the river and return to River Dike County, Chen Wanyun said solemnly. Qin Mu shook his head. There are also quite a lot of corpses sunk in the river. We can't return. Just as he said that, sounds of water traveled over from the riverside. Among the black-colored fog, the revived corpses walked ashore from the bottom of the river with water dripping off their bodies. When they saw them, they suddenly sprinted towards here. We can only head to southern borders and look for the chance to return to the north. Qin Mu had no change in expression as he raised his hand to pat his waist. A sword light flew out from Taoya's sack and transformed into wave sword form. With the sword light revolving, it severed the heads of the Nine Spectres sect's disciples. The few Nine Spectres sect's disciples became headless zombies. They immediately bent over and picked up their heads, clasping them under their armpits, and continued to rush over. A head under the armpit of the corpse opened his mouth and shouted with a sharp voice, "Come quickly! There are some that have slipped through the net. Come quickly!" Even though Yun Ke, Yu Qinghong, and Chen Wanyun were quite knowledgeable and seen a lot, they had never seen such a sinister spell before. On the other hand, Si Yunxiang, who was always shy and timid, was calm and composed. She was not the slightest afraid. Qin Mu spread his 5 fingers and gave a sudden squeeze. The sword light of Junior Protector Sword immediately turned into spiral sword form. The sword spun and sliced the disciples of 9 Spectres Sect into pieces as he warned solemnly. Move quickly in case the experts of 9 Spectres Sect catches up. The few of them quickly sprinted towards the darkness. Yun Ke looked at the flames surrounding Deer County and felt slight fear and dismal in his heart. To the southern borders? That's the nest of the enemies. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 184. Ghost Transferring God Dispatching. The black fog grew denser and denser. It was daytime, yet it looked like the night. Qin Mu and the rest could still roughly determine the direction. When they raised their heads up to the sky, they could still see the sun, but the sun wasn't harsh to their eyes. It was like a faint circular halo that was much dimmer than the moonlight. Looking around their surrounding, they could only see the green mountain turning into a hazy black mountain. Noisy voices came from behind as someone shouted, "There are a few that escaped. There are 3 males and 3 females and also a huge lion. Don't go away. Pick up my head. Come back quickly." Qin Mu's heart moved slightly and he looked towards Chen Wanyun. Chen Wanyun understood his intention and his flying sword flew out of his sheath to dig a long hole in the ground for him to lie down. It was the first time he had met such a weird incident of the dead reviving, therefore he was slightly at a loss, but now he had already calmed down. Qin Mu waved his sleeves and swept up the earth on both sides, burying Chen Wanyun under the earth. The rest of them continued walking forward, and they didn't move much further when they heard miserable shrieks coming from their back. "Someone hid in the earth to ambush us. My head is severed. Does anyone see my head?" "Shut up, idiot. If your head is missing, how are you talking?" "So I see. No wonder I couldn't find it for so long. Which senior brother saw my leg? Sorry to trouble you, much thanks." Qin Mu made the dragon Qilin stop and Chen Wanyun immediately caught up. "There shouldn't be any more pursuers. Let us go quickly." Suddenly, singing voices faintly sounded out from the fog, and these songs were even more peculiar than the song coming from the river surface. These songs had no cadence and sounded very monotonous. Qin Mu made them stop for a moment while he sneaked over and saw the few singers that were singing. They were a few corpses singing and casting spells, executing soul guide in the dark forest. Their bodies were tattered and they looked very strange, casting spells in the darkness. Dead people casting spells? Qin Mu was slightly stunned. He suddenly thought of the divine art of 9 Spectres Sect and felt that they had the flavor of breaking through the boundary of life and death. If this kind of divine art was researched to its limit, could it break the boundary between life and death and achieve eternal life? The divine arts of 9 Spectres Sect were far from being called eternal life now. They were only guiding the souls of the dead back from the netherworld, to allow the souls to reside in their own bodies temporarily. They had to continue to execute Soul Guide, and if they stopped executing Soul Guide, their souls might probably be dragged back to the netherworld and they would really die. No wonder those corpses are also executing Soul Guide. Qin Mu thought to himself, they must execute Soul Guide continuously for them to be able to continue moving. These dead men are not weak in cultivation, therefore, it's still best to avoid them. He left these dead people alone and sneaked back. Let us change a direction. They didn't move much further when they met another group of 9 Spectres Sect disciples that were casting spells. Other than these 9 Spectres Sect disciples that were already dead, he also saw a few disciples of Corpse Immortal Cult that were also controlling corpses to surround the soldiers that were escaping from the city. The flying zombies flew by walking on the yellow joss papers beneath their feet. Qin Mu frowned and changed another direction. Let us head to Deer Mountain. The corpses of 9 Spectres Sect were buried there, and they slaughtered their way to the county city from there. Therefore it must be empty over there. Everyone was extremely nervous as the people of 9 Spectres Sect and Corpse Immortal Cult were now everywhere in the black fog. Since Corpse Immortal Cult was eradicated by Yu and Chuyu, he reckoned the cult disciples' corpses were also buried nearby, allowing 9 Spectres Sect to revive them as well. It was obvious that 9 Spectres Sect had come prepared, catching Yu and Chuyu off guard. If this situation went on, Liz Ho would probably be in danger. Qin Mu thought to himself, there must definitely be a ruthless fellow behind the scenes in 9 Spectres Sect. For victory, He could even sacrifice the lives of so many disciples of 9 specters sect unscrupulously. They came to Deer Mountain and there was indeed no one here. The black fog had also faded quite a bit. Chan Wanyun, Yun Ke and the rest gradually put their hearts down. As long as they crossed this mountain and left the area shrouded by the black fog, they would be temporarily safe. Suddenly, a cadenced chant sounded from the mountain. Everyone's heart turned anxious again and they looked towards Qin Mu. Qin Mu frowned slightly and whispered, "Something's wrong with his chanting. This isn't Soul Guide and is another kind of spell." Yu Qinghong and the rest couldn't hear the difference. They didn't know much about Soul Guide of 9 Specters sect while Qin Mu had studied this divine art before, thus he could hear some disparity from the chants. "You guys stay here. I'll go and have a look." Qin Mu instructed them and approached the chantings silently. When he came near to the chantings, Qin Mu's footsteps became even softer. On the mountain col in front of him, he could see a sacrificial altar, and there were over 10 male and female Taoists casting spells on the sacrificial altar. That sacrificial altar was constructed by skeletons. The length and width were the same, each being 13 yards long. Meanwhile, on the altar, skulls were used to create a flat surface. With a white banner erected at the 4 corners, north, south, east, west. Runes written in cinnabar mixed with blood were on the white banners. A sculpture of an 8-armed devil god was erected on the center of the sacrificial altar. This sculpture squatted with one single leg while the other leg wrapped the previous one around the back of its calf. With the palms of the 8 arms clasped together, the devil god had 4 faces and each face had 3 eyes. These male and female Taoists each executed a talisman treasure, and the talisman treasures floated in the air. The talisman had numerous surfaces, and on each surface was a rune. With these Taoists chant, the runes on the talisman treasures lighted up continuously. The runes that lighted up shone precisely on the body of the devil god's sculpture. Whenever a place got shone on, a rune would light up on the devil god's sculpture. The talisman treasure continuously spun and lighted up the runes on the sculpture one after another. At this moment, more than half of the runes on this devil god sculpture had been lighted up. Ghost transferring god dispatching runes command. Qin Mu's heart trembled slightly. The spells of Great Mountain Sect. They are the disciples of Great Mountain Sect, which was already exterminated. These dozen male and female Taoists were all divine arts practitioners, and it looked like that they had already been executing ghost transferring god dispatching runes command for quite some time. It was obvious that after Great Mountain Sect was exterminated, they had conspired to strike back, allying themselves with 9 Specters Sect and Corpse Immortal Cult. Qin Mu then took the time which 9 Specters Sect rose up in revolt into consideration, and found it was precisely the time when the scholars of Imperial College were just arriving at Lizhou and Deer County. This meant that there was someone who had clearly kept tabs on the movement of the scholars of Imperial College, and even the time the Imperial scholars would reach here. The scholars of Imperial College coming out for experience were all elites chosen from their own realms. These scholars would become the future officials of Eternal Peace Empire, taking over the current batch of officials that had come from each and every sect. The current officials mostly belonged to the older generation, while the Imperial scholars were the new generation. If this batch of scholars was to be entirely eradicated, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor would lose a pillar of strength in his new generation. This time the scholars coming out for experience was a decree by the Emperor, and those who knew this beforehand would only be the first-ranking high officials who held high authority other than Gu Linwan. Qin Mu's gaze flickered. Among the first-ranking powerful ministers, there were definitely people who had betrayed. He very much wanted to continue watching how these disciples of Great Mountain Sect summoned the Devil God, but if he waited until the Devil God was summoned, their deaths would probably be due. Qin Mu sneaked back silently and described what he had seen to Chan Wanyun and the rest. 13 divine arts practitioners, and their abilities aren't weak. If they bring out the Devil God, none of us will be able to escape. We'll have to eliminate them before they bring out the Devil God and destroy the sacrificial altar. Who dares to follow me to kill them? Kill divine arts practitioners? Yun Ke and Yu Qinghong were both astonished. And 13 of them? Qin Mu gave them a glance. You guys don't dare? Yun Ke muttered. I felt a little afraid. They are divine arts practitioners, and furthermore, there are 13 of them. Qin Mu replied solemnly, "If we don't kill them, when they bring out the devil god, not only will we die, the entire Lizho would be destroyed." Chen Wanyun muttered to himself irresolutely and asked, "Is Great Mountain Sect a spell sect?" Si Yunxiang tightened the sword case on her back and said, "I've heard my elders mention before that Great Mountain Sect was a sect that was proficient in cultivating spells related to souls. They aren't as proficient in sword skills or battle techniques. Back then, when Imperial Preceptor exterminated Great Mountain Sect, he brought a team of divine arts practitioners that cultivated sword skill to attack Great Mountain, exterminating this sect. After Great Mountain Sect got exterminated, their disciples that were scattered outside might not learn the traditional spells and won't have many attainments in their battle techniques and sword skills." Qin Mu said, "Imperial Preceptor used sword skills to kill them, but we won't use sword skills. We'll use battle techniques. If we use sword skills, we won't win their spells. But in close combat, before they could even execute their spells, they would be slain by us. Wanyun, Yunkei, Qinghong, I've seen your battle techniques before, and they aren't weak. Do you have the guts to face them?" Chen Wanyun replied solemnly, "You dare, I dare." Qin Mu looked at Si Yunxiang, and Si Yunxiang lowered her head while saying, "Yunxiang will take Imperial Academician as my only guide." Qin Mu then looked at Yu Qinghong, and her eyes were sparkling as she found it hard to suppress her excitement. "I had never come to grips with such a situation before. How can I not participate? Wolf slave, get ready as well." Qin Mu's gaze fell on Monk Yun Kei, and he hesitated for a moment before gritting his teeth. "If I don't enter hell, who would? I'm in," Qin Mu said. "I will be the first to rush out later and slaughter my way up to the sacrificial altar to pave the way for you guys. You guys will follow behind me and fight in close combat. We'll have to fight as quick as possible and cannot drag the battle out. The sacrificial is only 13 by 13 yards. With such cramped space, you guys will have to think what move you want to use and go through it several times in your mind." Yu Qinghong was so excited both her hands were trembling as she smiled. "Following you isn't so bad after all. The first battle is already so exciting. I already can't wait." Qin Mu stooped down and moved forward. Chen Wanyun and the rest followed him and came to the mountain kernel. They could see that the runes on the body of Devil God's sculpture were almost all lit up. The 13 female and male Taoists were still executing their talisman as they continued walking around the sacrificial altar. The chants came out continuously from their mouth as if it was an ancient sacrificial language. Qin Mu's heart jumped, and he suppressed his urge to immediately rush out and break the sacrificial ritual. He instructed softly, "Observe the terrain, and after you guys are done, we'll make our move. Linger, bring the dragon Qilin to the other side and make some sounds to attract their attention." Hu Linger immediately brought the dragon Qilin to take a detour around the sacrificial altar and went towards the right. After a moment, Yu Qinghong said softly, "We are done observing." Qin Mu waved his hand, and Hu Linger immediately jumped out from the underbrush while the dragon Qilin roared behind her and gave chase as if he was hunting. The 13 Taoists on the sacrificial altar were astonished, but when they saw the fox and the dragon Qilin, a Taoist smiled. So it was a huge lion catching its prey. Before he could even finish his words, he saw a knife light flashed by. Qin Mu had already arrived at the sacrificial altar with each hand wielding a knife. The human head rolled down as he raised his hand. Battle technique. Every cloud has a silver lining. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 185. Summoning the Devil. On this sacrificial altar that not was very large, a vertical and a horizontal knife light shone. The horizontal knife light beheaded that Taoist, while the vertical knife light sliced down from the head of another female Taoist. That female Taoist was a divine arts practitioner of 6 Directions realm, and even though she had never cultivated battle techniques before, she had a golden chain hanging around her forehead, and in the middle of this chain was a jewel. Light burst forth from this jewel and blocked this knife from Qin Mu. Qin Mu dragged his knife, and the female Taoist's forehead bled. Her vital qi immediately burst forth, and the horsetail whisk in her other hand bloomed like a flower that had countless petals. The thousands of threads from the horsetail whisk stabbed towards Qin Mu. Her attacks just unleashed, and she saw countless of sword light overwhelming her. Midnight battle across stormy cities. Qin Mu's footsteps moved, and he avoided the horsetail whisk that was stabbing towards him and went behind the female Taoist's corpse, which had not collapsed to the ground yet. Behind that female Taoist's corpse, there was a Taoist behind her. That Taoist had already returned to his senses, and yellow joss papers flew out from the pouch on his waist. However, at this moment, Qin Mu threw away his knives and jabbed with his fingers, putting together. The vital qi at his fingertips turned into incomparably sharp sword light and penetrated through the heart of that Taoist's brows. Behind Qin Mu, a dragon and an elephant rose into the sky. The dragon coiled around Yun Ke as he stepped on the elephant and slaughtered towards a female Taoist. A loud boom sounded out as he smashed the female Taoist onto the sculpture of the devil god. That female Taoist spat out blood and her vital qi burst forth, reflecting him away. She was about to kill him when a sword light flashed by and smeared her throat, giving off a soft clink sound. This female Taoist's vital qi was so dense that she actually used her vital qi to block the sword. However, in the next moment, Chen Wanyun appeared beside her and grabbed the sword's hilt. With all his strength, he actually pushed her onto the devil god's sculpture and pulled out his sword forcefully, bursting forth with blood light. Wolf Slave's body flashed and he leaped onto the head of the sculpture. With two of his devil knives appearing and disappearing unpredictably, he hacked downwards. Meanwhile, Yu Qinghong stood on the shoulders of Wolf Slave, and sharp swords flew out from the sword case on her back, turning into drill sword form as she stabbed towards a Taoist below. That Taoist grabbed a white banner stabbed on the altar and held the banner in a reverse grip. The white banner trembled and the runes on the banner lighted up and swam out like weird red snakes to block the two devil knives. Meanwhile, Yu Qinghong's drill sword form drilled through the banner and tunneled into the heart of his brows. At the same time, Si Yunxiang flashed past like a phantom and gave repeated blows with a kind of strange madra, vibrating another female Taoist to death, shattering all her bones. Chen Wanyun's heart leaped when he saw this. Junior sister Si hid her abilities well. Her cultivation is extremely powerful. He leaped towards another Taoist, and the Taoist suddenly jumped down from the altar to run away. Behind him, the yellow joss paper flew towards the sacrificial altar. Chen Wanyun immediately gave chase, but the yellow joss papers exploded one after another, blowing him away ruthlessly. At the other side, Yun Ke moved to block that Taoist, executing Great Five Platform Madra to block that Taoist's way. That Taoist sneered and splayed out his 5 fingers. Thunder burst forth from the heart of his palm and shook Yun Ke's soul. That Taoist put his mind at rest and shouted sternly, "A bunch of younger generation that hasn't even cultivated to 6 fusion realm actually." Just as he said that, he felt a chill from the back of his heart and he lowered his head to see a sword piercing through his chest. He had totally no idea when that person behind him had closed in on him. Qin Mu pulled out his sword and the person croaked, "Great body technique." When he finished saying that, he collapsed to the ground and stopped breathing. Qin Mu returned his sword into the sheath, and on the altar, Yu Qinghong, Wolf Slave, and Si Yunxiang were still killing the other Taoist. They circled the altar and saw corpses surrounding the devil god sculpture. Some Taoists were not collapsed on the floor and were nailed to the devil god sculpture. Some of the Taoists were hung on the white banner and some were turned into a pile of mush. Some of their heads were smashed by an iron hammer and they all died differently. The 3 of them were shaken and Si Yunxiang inspected the corpses with a grave expression. These corpses had all suffered Qin Mu's ruthless attack in an instant and died before they could even unleash their divine arts. They all basically died from just one move, she thought to herself secretly and raised her eyes to look at Qin Mu. 13 divine arts practitioners, even though their battle techniques weren't strong, divine arts practitioners were divine arts practitioners after all. Even though everyone said that it was sure death if a strong practitioner of the spell school was to be closed in by strong practitioners of the battle technique school, those were only casual talk. If there was a difference in realm, battle techniques might not be able to break through the opponent's defensive divine arts. Even though they had caught the enemies unprepared, Qin Mu's battle prowess was way too strong. His speed was also way too fast. Qin Mu trembled his junior protector sword and shook off the blood on his sword. Returning the sword into his sheath, he said, clean the battlefield and immediately destroy the devil god's sculpture. Just as he had said that, a loud boom suddenly came from not far away. Blood light shone among the black fog, dyeing the pitch-black fog blood red. That blood light was over 300 yards high, and they could even see it clearly while standing at the mountain col. A terrifying power came surging from another world and pounded at where the blood light had burst forth from. Following that, rumblings of thunder sounded out as bolts of lightning struck around the surroundings of the blood light. That was the bolts of lightning compressed out from the space by the terrifying power. If the power was too strong, the vibrating force would compress the space and cause the space to become unstable. When space became unstable, the lightning hidden in the space would burst forth. Everyone's expression turned into a daze as they saw an incomparably huge body gradually standing up at where the blood light and bolts of lightning were gathering at. That was a devil god with horns on his head and have 4 arms and 4 legs. Even though it was only a sculpture, towering flames overflowed from his body, as if a devil god had descended into this world. This devil god that had descended was even taller than this deer mountain, and with smoke billowing out from its body. There were flames and rays of lightning mixed with the smoke. Meanwhile, the blood light soared into the sky and hung above his head. There was another place where the great mountain sect was summoning another devil. Qin Mu's limbs turned icy cold. On the other side, the divine arts practitioners of Great Mountain Sect had succeeded in casting their spell and summoned the devil god over. The gaze of that imposing devil god was like bolts of lightning interweaving each other. Wherever the gaze swept by, all the trees and rocks would be completely reduced to ashes with a fizzle. Qin Mu let out a murky breath and said in a low voice, "Strip!" Everyone was slightly stunned, and Monk Yun Ke muttered, "I have to undress again." Si Yunxiang understood what he meant and immediately undressed the clothes from the corpse on the ground. The other people also immediately understood Qin Mu's meaning and hurriedly took off the clothes of Great Mountain Sect's divine arts practitioners. Qin Mu also wore the clothes of the Great Mountain Sect's disciple while instructing with a low voice, "Pluck out those white banners and pick up the talisman treasures as backup." Chun Wanyun and the rest went forward to pluck out the white banner and pick up the talisman treasure. When they were all ready, they saw the devil god blustering towards the river surface, tremoring the huge waves of surging river into the sky. Everyone's expression changed hugely, and the dragon Qilin had also rushed over. Qin Mu said quickly, "We need to move away from here immediately. This place is no longer for us, scholars of 5 Elements realm, to have a footing. Are there any items on you that could represent you as an imperial scholar? Hand them all to me." Yun Ke took out his pass and book tablet while muttering, "Are we really going to send ourselves to death going to the southern border?" Qin Mu kept everyone's passes and book tablets into his Taoyes sack and said, "We are going to take a detour from the southern border. After we make it through this battlefield, we'll just have to cross the river and we'll be safe once we reach the north of the river." He let out a murky breath and was about to order them to move off when he took a glance at the devil god sculpture which was yet completed. His heart wavered and he carried the sculpture up, tying it on the dragon Qilin's back. "Let's go to the south." Everyone was in a heavy mood as they followed him and headed toward the south along the foothills. After about 3 to 4 miles, they had finally walked out of the area shrouded by the black fog. Walking another 3 to 4 miles ahead, Qin Mu turned his head back and saw the black fog was like an incomparably huge black wall which was covered on the surroundings of surging river, detaining both sides of the shores. In the middle of the black fog was an enormous gate which opened access between life and death, connecting to the gate in the netherworld. "I wonder how many people would survive in Liz Ho," Qin Mu thought to himself. Not long after, Qin Mu suddenly stopped. "The army is here." Yun Ke was delighted. "Army? Our Eternal Peace's army." Qin Mu shook his head and pointed forward. "The rebel army." Everyone looked forward, and there were dozens of ships flying towards them. The gonfalons were brandished on the ships, and around each and every ship were strange beasts that were flying in the sky. There were strange beasts of shapes and sizes, having a numerous number of species. Meanwhile, below the army in the sky, there were rows of soldiers that were made up by martial arts practitioners and divine arts practitioners. Among the soldiers, There were huge beasts that were strapped full with huge circular rocks. These beasts were dozens of yards tall and was like moving mountains. With every step they took, the ground trembled endlessly. Qin Mu and the rest stood at one side and let this huge army that was heading towards the battlefield at Surging River to pass. A general standing on one of the ships shot his lightning-like gaze over and swept Qin Mu and the rest before inquiring the officer beside him, "Who are those people?" The officer beside him gave Qin Mu and the rest a few glances and said, "They seem to be disciples of Great Mountain Sect. I'll head down to ask them." This general leaped down from the ship, and every time his feet landed, there would be a golden lotus blooming under his feet. With a lotus blooming with each footstep, he walked over to Qin Mu and the rest step by step, making everyone felt fear and trepidation in the face of disaster. This was a great expert of 7 Stars realm which could step on the void. If he wanted to kill them, it was as easy as blowing away a speck of dust. That officer saw the devil god sculpture on the dragon Qilin's back and asked coldly, "Disciples of Great Mountain Sect, running without a fight, how should you be punished?" Qin Mu bowed and replied in a neither servile nor overbearing tone, "Our Great Mountain Sect has tried our best. We have already summoned out a devil god to assist in the battle. Not only are we not guilty, we've done a meritorious deed instead." That officer gave a cold snort. "However, you've escaped from the battle. This is a crime punishable by death, to be beheaded on the spot." Qin Mu had an expression of grief and indignation as he protested. "We suffered from the sneak attack of Liz Ho, and among my 13 brothers and sisters, 7 of them had died in battle. Only the 6 of us are left. When we are putting our lives on the line, where are your people? Our Great Mountain Sect has already been exterminated and only we're left. Do you really want all of us to die there? General, leave some seeds for our Great Mountain Sect." That general hesitated and raised his head to look up. On the ship in the sky, that general said solemnly, "There are already very little people in Great Mountain Sect, so there's no need to delve into this. They had already done a great deed by summoning one devil god out to assist in the battle. Let them execute their spells to affirm their identity before letting them go." Chan Wanyun, Yun Ke, and the rest broke out in cold sweat. They had never cultivated before the spells of Great Mountain Sect. Qin Mu executed a talisman treasure, and the general's voice came sounding out, "Not a talisman treasure. Spells." Qin Mu's vital chi circulated, and his vital chi turned into a rune which shone onto the body of the devil god sculpture, lighting up a rune on the devil god sculpture. That general bowed and said, "General Shaoui, this is indeed Ghost transferring God dispatching runes command of Great Mountain Sect." General Shaoui on the ship waved his hand. "Let them go. Move the army and attack Liz Ho." "Halt." General Shaoi's gaze landed on Qin Mu and the rest. A smile curled up on his lips. "Send them to Heaven Wave City and let them summon a devil god there as well." Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 186. Qin Mu summoning the devil. Heaven Wave City? Qin Mu and the rest had a slight change in expression. They felt they had just escaped from the wolf pack and into the tiger's den. General Shaoui smiled. Great Mountain Sect's Ghost transferring God dispatching runes command is indeed powerful. Heaven Wave City is also attacking the opposite shore, therefore if there's a devil god assisting them, there would be much lesser casualties in Heaven Wave City. Lin Ding, you'll follow them. That officer immediately acknowledged. General Shaoui waved his hand and let the army be on their way. Qin Mu and the rest bowed, and when the army had passed by, that officer Lin Ding smiled. Junior brothers, let us head for Heaven Wave City. Qin Mu's expression remained unchanged and said, Please, Officer Lin. Lin Ding smiled. Your Great Mountain Sect has done a meritorious deed, and even though there are only a few of you left, you could still summon Devil God forward to assist us in battle. You guys will definitely reestablish your sect and shine. Even though you are still quite young, I admire this kind of miraculous ability. Qin Mu laughed out loud with a face full of glory. We're indebted to Officer's lucky words. That's right, Officer. I see you're not that old yet your cultivation is high. May I dare to ask what is Officer's realm now? Peak of 7 Stars realm, however. It's always hard to advance to Celestial Being realm. Lin Ding sighed ruefully. Celestial being is hard, and now that the world is in turmoil, we will have to enforce justice on behalf of heaven, to clean up the laws and discipline of the imperial court, to get rid of imperial preceptor, that renegade. This is a chance, and I might just be able to take this chance to have a breakthrough. You guys might be young, but you must grasp this chance as well. He saw everyone looking somewhat puzzled and said solemnly, "Since ancient times, heroes are born from the battlefield. The more chaotic the world becomes, the easier it is to improve. Why is that so? This is because when the strong practitioners clash, their philosophies collide, and all kinds of divine arts, paths and skills would emerge, broadening one's horizons, raising their knowledge and experience. The pressure from strong practitioners, pressure from life and death, would push ourselves forward with acute determination, continuing to improve. For example, the ghost transferring God dispatching runes command of your great mountain sect, who would execute this kind of spell in times of peace? The more chaotic it gets, the more chances they would be able to be executed. Only then would one improve." Chen Wanyun and the rest felt that his words were very logical. This time, ghost transferring God dispatching runes command, this kind of neglected spells had really broadened their horizons. After Great Mountain Sect was exterminated, their remnant disciples could actually still summon a devil god to assist in battle. How astonishing was the battle prowess of that devil god! A mere unremarkable spell could actually give forth to such an astonishing power, truly shaking them. In addition to that, Soul Guide was also an unremarkable spell which didn't have much power. When they saw this kind of spell in Floor of Heavenly Records, they would usually throw them aside and not further study them. In terms of the power of spells, there were thousands of spells in Floor of Heavenly Records that would surpass these two unremarkable spells. However, it was a low-level spell like Soul Guide that had changed the situation of the entire war just like that, causing a border commander like Yu and Chuyu to suffer a huge setback, making it difficult to protect Lizho. Soul Guide and Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command absolutely had no power, but by using these spells at the right situation, the power this kind of neglected spells could unleash would far surpass the power of a magnificent army with thousands of men and horses. This Officer Lin Ding may be the opposing force, but his experience surpassed them. This also stressed them. Since Officer Lin Ding's experience and strength much higher than theirs, if he discovered any tiny hints, they would probably die miserably. Furthermore, even if Officer Lin Ding couldn't find any flaw with them, they would still die if they couldn't summon the Devil God when they reached Heaven Wave City. Even if they summoned the Devil God which would massacre the army of Eternal Peace, they would still have to die when they returned to the capital city. No matter how they looked at it, it was a sure death ending. If we could attack him mercilessly all together, will we be able to get rid of this great expert? Qin Mu calculated secretly and felt his victory was uncertain. Unless he could make the Dragon Qilin make a move, however, with the Dragon Qilin's temperament of always resigning himself to adversity, it would probably be hard to make him put his life on the line. We can get rid of 13 divine arts practitioners, so why can't we deal with an expert of 7 stars realm? Qin Mu's gaze wavered. They walked several miles forward and they suddenly heard yells coming over. A band of bandits came slaughtering over, and these bandits weren't weak at all. The head of the bandits was a divine arts practitioners while the others were martial arts practitioners. Everyone was lusting to kill when Officer Lin Ding smiled. "Don't worry, they're merely some vermins. Let them come." Those bandits slaughtered over, and Officer Lin Ding only raised a hand and unleashed a madra. With the thunder and palm bursting forth, a loud boom sounded out with a flash of white light, exploding the bodies of the dozens of bandits. Even the divine arts practitioner also exploded on the spot and died. Thunder in palm of the battle technique school. Qin Mu's heart leaped and instantly felt a thorny problem in his hand. Against strong practitioners of battle technique school, sneak attack was completely useless. They were all martial arts practitioners of 5 elements realm, therefore if they jumped on him, they would at most be scratching Officer Lin Ding's back and wouldn't be able to hurt him. With anxiousness in their hearts, they could only follow Officer Lin Ding towards Heaven Wave City. Qin Mu asked, "General Lin Ding, may I ask what's the background of General Xiaoyi?" Officer Lin Ding revealed an expression of admiration and said, "General Xiaoyi is the crown prince of Justice Exist Country, and after Justice Exist Country was annexed, The emperor was conferred as king with a different surname, while General Shaoi was conferred as Prince Shaoi. Now that imperial preceptor is throwing the skills in this world into disorder, this is for the path of the devil. This is a chance for General Shaoi, and he might just be able to rebuild his empire. Heaven Wave City is right ahead. In front of them, there was an unbroken chain of mountain peak beside the shore of surging river. The mountains forced surging river to go around them, and Heaven Wave City was building on the mountains that cut into surging river. Below was sheer cliffs and precipitous rock faces, which caused surging river to become more urgent here. Whenever the towering waves slapped onto the cliffs, they would give off world-shaking bangs. The waves which were shattered then rose high into the sky, as if there were countless of white jade pearls falling from the white clouds in the sky. Waves slapping the clouds right up to heaven. This was how Heaven Wave City came about. At this moment, there were soldiers of the rebel army everywhere in Heaven Wave City, which were looking at the army of Eternal Peace Empire across the river, holding on to their weapons and waiting for the time to make their move. Officer Lin Ding brought them to Heaven Wave City and said, "The person guarding this place is an existence of the cult master level, the Dragon King of Dragon Rider sect. You must have heard him before, right? Even though the ability of the Dragon King isn't that high, he had raised a flood dragon, and this flood dragon is powerful. It can kill strong practitioners of life and death realm without a problem." That's the son of the Dragon King in front, Long Jiaonan. The general keeping watch was a pretty and flirtatious male wearing a brightly colored gown. There was heavy makeup on his face and looked very provoking to the eyes. It was the young sect master of Dragon Rider sect, Long Jiaonan. Officer Lin Ding brought Qin Mu forward to make some inquiries. Long Jiaonan exchanged greeting with him and was slightly stunned when he suddenly saw Qin Mu. "This person looks familiar." Qin Mu felt alarmed in his heart and lowered his head to greet. When he entered the capital city for the first time, he had taken the ship that was heading towards the capital city with Wei Yong from River Tomb. Long Jiaonan had controlled a huge snake to fly in midair and killed everyone on the ship, leaving only him and Wei Yong escaping for their lives. In the hurry, Long Jiaonan may have seen his face before. "These few are the disciples of Great Mountain Sect," Officer Lin Ding introduced. "They summoned a devil god in Deer County. Thus General Shaoi had wanted them to cast their spells here in Heaven Wave City, to summon a devil god to assist us in the battle." Long Jiaonan couldn't remember where he had met Qin Mu before, but her eyes lit up and she chuckled. "Summoning the devil god? Well, this is interesting. What magical artifact do you guys need? I'll prepare them for you." Qin Mu immediately said, "We only need a white bone sacrificial altar that's 13 by 13 yards wide. It would have to be constructed using bones, and the platform of the altar would have to be laid out with skulls. The eye sockets of the skulls must be facing upwards and cannot be sloppy." "How troublesome." Long Jiaonan smiled. "In times of chaos, corpses are plentiful. Wait a moment. I'll order people to prepare the sacrificial altar. If the bones aren't enough, we'll kill some people to make up for it. The lives of Heaven Wave City's people are worthless." Qin Mu said, "We are executing a secret art, so we can't be disturbed. Therefore could General Long." Long Jiaonan gave him coquettish glances, and Qin Mu felt goosebumps popping up. Long Jiaonan smiled. "I understand. You can be at ease. I'll station the soldiers outside of the sacrificial altar. However, if you can't summon the devil god and make a fool out of me, I'll be sure to violate you thoroughly." Chan Wanyun, Yun Ke and Wolf Slave felt their hairs standing on ends. On the other hand, Si Yunxiang and Yu Qinghong still felt normal. Not long after, Long Jiaonan had already ordered his subordinates to build a white bone sacrificial altar in Heaven Wave City. This altar was situated in the city lord's manor. Long Jiaonan dismissed the soldiers and made them station outside, so they couldn't observe Qin Mu and the rest casting their spells. Qin Mu looked around and saw over 100 soldiers stationed outside, and it was pretty impossible for them to leave. "What should we do?" On the sacrificial altar, everyone looked at Qin Mu. Chan Wanyun said with a low voice, "We're now deep in the enemy's territory. Say, Senior Uncle Qin, you'll make the call." He finally changed and called Qin Mu Senior Uncle. Even though Yun Ke and Yu Qinghong were bewildered, They didn't probe. Qin Mu said solemnly, "Of course we cast spells to summon the devil, inviting the devil god over." Yun Kei jumped in shock and cried out, "We have not learned the spells of Great Mountain's sect before. How do we summon the devil god?" "I've learned before." Qin Mu carried the devil god sculpture over and placed it on the sacrificial altar. He then stabbed the white banner at the four corners and said, "I'll be the one summoning and dispatch this devil god over. Great Mountain sect requires 13 people to execute this spell, but I feel I can do it alone as well, although it would be slightly troublesome." Yun Kei said with hesitation, "Our whole family would be hung if we summon a devil god to massacre Eternal Peace Empire's army. Don't worry. There should definitely be some trick to summon the devil god. They won't let the devil god go on a rampage, otherwise the people summoning the devil god would have died as well." Qin Mu's gaze wavered and he spat out a murky breath. "If we summon the devil god over and make him attack Heaven Wave City, I think we can escape while chaos ensues. You guys guard the surroundings and be careful of any movements. I'll cast the spell." Everyone immediately stood guard around the sacrificial altar. Qin Mu took out the talisman treasure and took a look at the runes on the 1024 surfaces, memorizing them by heart. He then looked at the runes on the devil god sculpture, comparing them one by one before muttering to himself irresolutely and beginning to cast the spell. His vital chi burst forth and his vital chi threads raised the 13 talisman treasures up in mid-air, surrounding the devil god's sculpture. An obscure and ancient language sounded out from his nasal cavity and his oral cavity as his vital chi started to push the talisman treasures to transform, lighting up the runes on the talisman treasures one after another. The runes then shone onto the devil god sculpture, lighting up the runes that were imprinted around the sculpture of the devil god. Chen Wanyun and the rest were bewildered. The language coming out from Qin Mu's mouth was not the language they normally spoke. It was slightly similar to the language Great Mountain sect gave off when they were summoning the devil, but it seemed to be even more profound. "It's the devil language," Si Yunxiang said in a low voice. The runes of this devil god's sculpture lit up one by one. Controlling 13 talisman treasures required one to memorize over 1,000 runes and their arrangement. Even though Qin Mu had not yet mastered computational canon of supreme mystery, the memory had already improved by leaps and bounds, thus he could control them calmly. An hour later, more than half of the runes on this devil god sculpture had already been lighted up by him. At the same time, when he was chanting devil language, he felt that he had gradually made a connection with a being from another dark world in the depths of space and time through this sculpture. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 187. Descend of the Devil King. That Great Mountain sect's Taoist in the lead was astonished. Junior brother and junior sisters? This general might not know that the disciples of our Great Mountain sect were split into two groups to Deer County so as to invite the gods over. Luckily, we have succeeded in inviting a devil god over. However, the other group of disciples has all been murdered. The devil god sculpture and talisman treasures were robbed, as well as their clothes. Officer Lin Ding's expression changed hugely and he cried out, "If those that are summoning the devil now aren't the disciples of your Great Mountain sect, then who could they be?" That Taoist's eyes lighted up as he heard the faint chanting coming from the city lord's manor and said coldly, "I would also like to know who they are. This is bad. The person summoning the devil has already made a connection with the devil god in the devil realm. Let us hurry over." Lin Ding's eyes twitched irregularly as he hurriedly rushed towards the direction of the city lord's manor while shouting sternly, "Young sect master, quickly give the order to execute those demons in the city lord's manor." In the city lord's manor, Qin Mu felt his consciousness entering deep into another world through this devil god sculpture, and his consciousness traveled throughout this darkness before stopping suddenly. In front of him was a boundless space and time of darkness. Next, a humongous eye which was filled with scarlet-red flames opened up in the darkness. In front of this eye, he was minute like a speck of dust. On Qin Mu's left, another humongous eye opened up, and after that, another eye opened up above this two eyes. The pupil of the third eye contracted and its gaze slowly moved before landing on his body. "Weakling, you are summoning me," summoning the Dutian Devil King that rules the borderless territory of Dutian. Those three eyes gradually rose into the sky and went further and further away from Qin Mu's consciousness. However, they were still incomparably huge. Only now did Qin Mu notice there was still light beside his body, and he was like a lamp in the darkness. He looked at himself standing on the altar. The altar gave off a white glow and looked incomparably minute in the darkness, looking insignificant. The altar and he on the altar seemed to have come to another world. "You are summoning my strength." A voice resonated out from the center of the three eyes, far and high up. The voice bombarded his consciousness and trembling back and forth. "You are summoning me to your world, to massacre, to battle." Qin Mu said humbly, "O the great Dutian Devil King, I pray for your descent. I shall sacrifice to you thousands of powerful lives, all the divine arts practitioners of Heaven Wave City." The three eyes suddenly burst into flames and an earth-shaking voice resonated out. "As you wish!" The sacrificial altar below Qin Mu's feet suddenly lighted up and the rays spread out in all directions. In an instant, the entire Heaven Wave City appeared in the darkness. Qin Mu looked around and his heart pounded. The entire Heaven Wave City was under his eyes and all the people in Heaven Wave City were in his eyes. Every action and what they were wearing were all in his eyes, down to the very last detail. Following that, human figures started to disappear one after another from the city, and only the divine arts practitioners were left in the city. Those that had disappeared from the city were martial arts practitioners that had yet reached Six Directions realm and the ordinary people. These people didn't really disappear from Heaven Wave City, and instead, this Dutian Devil King was confirming his sacrifices. Qin Mu hurriedly pointed to the dragon Qilin beside the altar and said, "This dragon Qilin isn't part of the sacrifices offered to the great Dutian Devil King." "Shut up." An eerie and sinister voice came out from the back of those three eyes. Qin Mu saw another three more huge eyes spinning over behind these three eyes. "You have no rights to command Dutian Devil King. I'll borrow your consciousness to descend onto this city." Qin Mu suddenly felt his body becoming stiff and was unable to move as an incomparably terrifying strength surged over from another world. Rumble. Violent tremors traveled from the surroundings of the sacrificial altars. Blood light soared into the sky, reaching several hundred yards, and as Qin Mu bathed in the blood light, he could feel a terrifying strength descending onto this world through his consciousness and surging towards the body of the Devil God sculpture. The runes on the surface of the Devil God sculpture were like weird eyes frantically absorbing the energy surging over from another world. The surface of the Devil God sculpture cracked continuously and the wood chips exploded out in all directions. This Devil God sculpture became larger and larger as dense light leaked out from the cracked lines. Flesh could be faintly seen growing in the insides of the Devil God sculpture, which was made from wood. In a blink of an eye, the Devil God sculpture on the altar had grown dozens of yards tall and was still continuing to grow. Qin Mu only felt his consciousness splitting apart. Not only had the energy of Dutian Devil King descended, Dutian Devil King's consciousness had also come bombarding over. That was a sinister, terrifying, and irritable consciousness. This made Qin Mu's consciousness become insignificant in front of this terrifying consciousness, as if he could be crushed any moment. The nature of this Devil King was extremely violent, and he didn't care whether Qin Mu live or die. He just transferred his consciousness and strength from a space and time far away, pouring them into the Devil God sculpture. The Devil God sculpture was still expanding and becoming bigger. Thus all the wood had already shattered and turned into a body of flesh. Kacha, kacha. There were rolling thunders all around the altar as numerous bolts of lightning struck here and there, forcing Chen Wanyun and the rest to move back continuously. The dragon Qilin and Hu Linger were moving back continuously as well. The violent aura of that Devil God sculpture forced the dragon Qilin unable to have his footing. Beneath the feet of the Devil God sculpture, Qin Mu's body was trembling as a wound opened up at the heart of his brows. Fizzling sparks shot out from the heart of his brows and shone on the Devil God sculpture. Within the sparks was the consciousness of the Dutian Devil King. His consciousness was so strong that he nearly destroyed Qin Mu's consciousness. Qin Mu's forehead was non-stop bleeding and there were even smells of fresh blood burning. He couldn't move at all. Suddenly, he gritted his teeth and forcefully executed Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique to protect his consciousness. His train of thoughts had already stopped, but luckily for him, the pressure on him lessened considerably when Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique started circulating. Suddenly, Qin Mu felt the circulation of Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique had added some stuff into his own body. The sounds of slaughter shook the heaven as the spirit weapons bombarded over like clouds, causing him unable to ponder over it. Sounds of tremors rang beside his ear as the devil god sculpture placed down that raised leg, collapsing countless of buildings in the city lord's manor from the vibrations. Before the spirit weapons could even reach close, they were all blown up into pieces. Devil withdraw command. Several Taoists rushed in from outside, and when the Taoist in lead saw this sight, his eyes couldn't help opening wide from anger. The dozen and more Taoists hurriedly patted the rune pouches on their waists, causing countless of yellow joss paper to fly out from the rune pouch. Written on these yellow joss papers were weird runes that were different from Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command. The countless of yellow joss paper linked with each other and formed a huge yellow screen. The countless of runes on the yellow joss papers could actually link one another from head to tail, forming an incomparably huge and complicated character. The secret arts of Great Mountain Sect. Devil withdraw command. About a dozen of Taoists of Great Mountain Sect chanted in chorus and pushed their vital chi to activate this complicated character on the yellow screen. Devil withdraw command lighted up and shone towards Dutian Devil King. Just as Devil withdraw command shone onto the body of Dutian Devil King, the eyes of Dutian Devil King opened up one by one, and a bolt of lightning shot out from his gaze, tearing Devil withdraw command into pieces. About a dozen of Taoists under Devil withdraw command was also shown by his gaze, and they turned into ashes. However, as Devil withdraw command shone onto Dutian Devil King's body, Qin Mu instantly felt the heart of his brows turning light suddenly, and as if relieved of a heavy load. He regained control of his body and hurriedly retreated. There were still some puzzles in his heart. This devil god that he had summoned seemed to be slightly different. He didn't listen to him at all. He was extremely cruel and didn't care whether he lived or died at all. This devil god that he had summoned out was probably no ordinary devil god. Let us retreat. Qin Mu rapidly came to the others and shouted, "Big dragon, show your true form and bring us out of the city." The dragon Qilin gave a roar and heat waves instantly swept out, blowing Yu Qinghong and Yun Ke away. Chan Wan Yun and the wolf slave lost their footing and moved back a few steps, while Si Yunxiang's body just swayed and didn't move back at all. The dragon Qilin's body expanded and grew larger, with true fire blazing around his body. He instantly turned into a huge creature that was over 400 feet long. His height was even taller than the city tower, and as his body moved, the air around him exploded continuously from being compressed. Qin Mu flew and came to Yu Qinghong and Yun Ke's side in a flash to grab the both of them. With his fleeting footsteps, he came to the dragon Qilin's side and jumped up on the dragon Qilin's back. Chan Wan Yun and Si Yunxiang also jumped up, and Qin Mu shouted, "Run! Run as fast as possible." Fire clouds grew under the feet of the dragon Qilin and rose into the sky. At this moment, they heard Dutian Devil King's voice coming from their back, vibrating the air. "Run? Where to? Finally, someone has summoned me. I had not imparted out the spells of Dutian in vain. I'll construct a sacrificial altar here and build a passage to summon my true body, to summon the people of my Dutian. Ha ha ha! You will all be the skeletons on my sacrificial altar." His huge hand came grabbing over, and the air in the surrounding was almost solidified, freezing the dragon Qilin, which was running in the air. The dragon Qilin pushed his magic power, and the flame clouds raged, yet he was unable to move at all. As this Dutian Devil King was about to grab hold of them, a dragon roar suddenly sounded out. A middle-aged man rode a flood dragon and pounced over viciously. With its body coiled around the Dutian Devil King, the flood dragon spew out lightning and fire at the face of Dutian Devil King. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man stood on the head of the flood dragon, stabbing the head of Dutian Devil King with the sword lights flashing in his hand. Qin Mu and the rest were free from the constraints, and the dragon Qilin immediately rose into the sky, rushing out of the city. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief. The Dragon King of Dragon Rider sect is here. At this moment, a miserable cry sounded out. The cult master level flood dragon was actually pulled apart forcefully by the Dutian Devil King, whose punch made both the flood dragon and the Dragon King of Dragon Rider sect spat blood and fell back. Rah! The four faces of Dutian Devil King opened their mouths and shouted with all their might. The earth-shaking sound waves surged forth, causing countless of people to bleed from all their orifices. The dragon Qilin's body also swayed from the roars, and suddenly all 12 eyes of Dutian Devil King lighted up brightly. With bolts of lightning interweaving each other, they swept over from all directions, slicing through countless of experts in Heaven Wave City that were pouncing over. The dragon Qilin was also hit in his butt and snarled in pain, falling from the sky. Luckily for him, his skin was thick, thus he wasn't killed by Dutian Devil King's gaze. The dragon Qilin landed in the city and his body shrank as he stumbled. Qin Mu and the rest hurriedly came down from his back only to see Dutian Devil King sweeping all the experts in the city lord's manor while chuckling. I was the one who had imparted ghost transferring god dispatching runes command. You weaklings wouldn't have thought of it, am I right? I will use your corpses to construct a huge sacrificial altar to let my true body to descend. The people of my Dutian shall descend into this world. Yu Qinghong was dazed and muttered, Academician, what kind of devil have you summoned? Qin Mu was also a little dumbstruck. I don't know either. Let us leave quickly. Long Jiaonan is coming over. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 188. Male or female? They quickly brought the dragon Qilin to head out. The dragon Qilin had suffered an injury, thus his legs were inconvenient. Hu Linger jumped onto Qin Mu's back and immediately cast a spell to summon a tornado, sweeping this dragon Qilin into the whirlwind and brought him along. Meanwhile, behind them, Heaven Wave City, which was constructed on the mountain range beside the river, was collapsing. As the huge Devil King fought numerous strong practitioners in the city, he actually had the free time to use the flesh and bones of the people he killed to build his sacrificial altar. Bloody bones and skulls continuous flew through the air and landed under his feet, building a layer very quickly. His true body was still located in that so-called Dutian, and only his magic power and consciousness had descended. Yet the strength of his abilities had already surpassed strong practitioners of the cult master level. In the city, the Dragon King of Dragon Rider sect was not the only expert of the cult master level. There were also other stronger practitioners of the life and death realm as well as the divine bridge realm. However, even when they attacked all together, they were helpless against Dutian Devil King and got injured one after another. As for the army stationed in the city, the thousands of divine arts practitioners were all injured in Dutian Devil King's roars, and countless of them were killed by the 12 gazes of Dutian Devil King. The city was in a piece of chaos, and countless soldiers were escaping for their lives in undisciplined crowds, and some even jumped straight into the river. However, they were all smashed into pieces on the mountain cliff by the towering huge waves of surging river. The soldiers in the city were usually disciples from each and every sect and lacked the discipline they had in the military. When they met something terrifying like this, they just broke down instantly and had no morale at all. It was absolutely impossible for their armed forces to cooperate and trap Dutian Devil King using formations. When Qin Mu followed Chancellor Bashan to the area beyond the Great Wall for experience, the combined strength of 800 strong practitioners of the prairie could wear down Chancellor Bashan's divine arts, heavenly spirits escarpment, forcing him to retreat again and again. Chancellor Bashan was a strong practitioner of the cult master level and was even forced to retreat. With thousands of divine arts practitioners and martial arts practitioners in Heaven Wave City, if they cooperated with each other, they would probably be able to contend with Dutian Devil King for a short period of time. However, each and every sect was like a sheet of loose sand, unable to be gathered together. Escaping for their lives were more important. Qin Mu looked back and saw Long Jiaonan chasing desperately. However, it didn't look like he was chasing after them. Oh right, Long Jiaonan is also running for his life. Qin Mu came to a realization. Boom! Terrifying vibrations burst forth from the clash of the strong practitioners. Buildings crumbled and disintegrated in midair while Qin Mu and the rest were lifted into the air by the terrifying vibrations. Countless of people flailed their limbs and flew off in all directions. Boom! Boom! When they were still in midair, Another few terrifying vibrations came traveling over and Qin Mu vomited blood continuously. He hurriedly grabbed Hu Linger down from his backpack and embraced her tightly so that Hu Linger wouldn't be vibrated to death. When the fourth vibration rushed over, Qin Mu grunted and executed Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. His body and soul immediately became incomparably durable, but he was still blown away. Thud. Qin Mu crashed into the ground and tumbled several times before coming to a stop. He crashed into a forest and the gale whooshed past the top of the forest, slicing countless crowns of the trees off. That was the aftermath of the divine arts from the strong practitioners of Heaven Wave City. Blood flowed out from the corner of Qin Mu's mouth and his eyes stared wide open as he felt a suffocation in his chest. After a moment, he suddenly gasped for huge breaths and he heard a pop sound coming from his chest. His chest should be damaged. He panted heavily and took Hu Linger out from his chest. Hu Linger was also injured quite badly and had fainted. Qin Mu hurriedly took out a jade bottle from his Taoyes sack. Pinching her mouth open, he poured a few drops of dragon's saliva into his mouth. After a moment, Hu Linger gradually woke up and was in a daze. She then said with a sobbing tone, "I have lost Big Dragon." The Dragon Qilin had inconvenience in walking, thus Hu Linger had summoned a tornado with her spells and let this Dragon Qilin sit on the tornado, allowing him to float in mid-air. The few vibrations that had traveled over earlier destroyed her spells and blew the Dragon Qilin far away as well. Qin Mu consoled her. "It's okay. Big Dragon was merely hurt on the butt and he will heal himself, although I'm afraid he might not be able to reach the wound to lick it. Furthermore, I have also lost Chen Wanyun and the rest. Big Dragon is very valuable." Hu Linger sobbed. "Chen Wanyun and the rest are worthless." Qin Mu got up and circulated his vital qi, expelling the extravasated blood from his chest. He then picked her up and said, "Let's go find them." Just as he said that, his body became stiff. Sounds of trees collapsing came from the depths of the forest and a huge snake gradually slithered out from the forest, pushing the trees down from both sides. That huge snake was the one that destroyed the ship that Qin Mu and Wei Yong took when they were heading to the capital city. The huge creature that Long Jiaonan raised. Kiki, Kiki. Violent coughs came from the head of the snake. Qin Mu raised his head and saw a pretty man in disheveled clothes sitting on the flat head of the snake coughing and spitting blood. Thousands of holes were on his flowery gown and even the rogue and powder on his face were smeared, looking battered and exhausted. "You destroyed Heaven Wave City, destroyed my Dragon Rider sect." Long Jiaonan stood up shakily from the head of the huge snake, seemingly crying yet not crying. Her gaze landed on Qin Mu's body, and Qin Mu shivered with fear as he steadily moved back step by step. Long Jiaonan was an expert and had faced off with the bow and arrow cavalry as well as the sword guards outside the capital city. Even they didn't manage to hold him back and let him escape unscathed. "Who exactly are you?" The huge flowery crowned snake raised its head up and looked down at Qin Mu. Long Jiaonan screeched, "Did Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor send you?" Qin Mu didn't say a word and moved back to the side of a huge tree. Suddenly his body disappeared in a flash as he hid himself behind the tree. Long Jiaonan shrieked and stretched his hand forward to grab. His vital qi transformed into a huge hand and crushed the huge tree into pieces. However, there was no trace of Qin Mu behind the huge tree. Long Jiaonan turned frantic and raised his hands forwards. The ground trembled continuously as sharp rock spikes pierced out from the ground. In the radius of dozens of yards, there were these kinds of rock spikes everywhere, turning the area into a rock forest. "Run? You can't run." That huge snake slithered its body and crushed all the rock spikes as it moved forward. Meanwhile, Long Jiaonan, who was on the snake's head, seemed to be injured as his body squirmed on the head of the snake as if he was a human snake. After squirming for some time, his head suddenly split open and then his face. Another head popped out. He continued squirming like a snake and not long after, he shed a human skin and Long Jiaonan stood naked. He fetched a set of new clothes and slowly wore it while looking around and chuckling. "I know you haven't left far away and are still lying low around here. I can feel your gaze. You're admiring my body." About 300 yards away from him, Qin Mu was squatting in the crown of a huge tree and fixed his gaze on the body of Long Jiaonan, who had gone through a transformation. Dragon Rider sect sure has peculiar techniques to actually be able to shed his own skin and change into a new body. However, didn't they say Long Jiaonan was the son of Dragon Rider sect's Dragon King? How come he's a woman with a plump chest? In the instant he hid his body behind the tree, he immediately raised his clothes up and teleported away, avoiding Long Jiaonan's sure kill strike. However, his cultivation wasn't high, thus he couldn't teleport far away. He could only teleport up to 600 yards and couldn't leave this forest. What made him the most astonished was this technique that Long Jiaonan cultivated. Long Jiaonan had injuries on his body, yet after he had shed his skin, there was actually no injuries at all. Furthermore, the Long Jiaonan that had crawled out was naked like a baby. Only now did Qin Mu realize that his body was different from his own and looked like a woman with an alluring body. He trained his chest much firmer than mine. I won't be able to train to this step. Qin Mu exclaimed secretly, "Is he a male or a female? Or could it be, she's a female but the Dragon King wished for a boy? Therefore, he had given her the name Jiaonan, which meant a delicate boy? The Dragon King had most probably raised her as a boy, resulting in her such a queer appearance." His gaze stayed on Long Jiaonan's body without blinking. If he blinked at this moment, the closing and opening of the eyes would reveal his position, and it would be very easy for Long Jiaonan to get his location. Long Jiaonan had such overbearing and powerful divine arts. Therefore, he was absolutely not his or her opponent. Furthermore, the teleportation clothing could only teleport him 3 to 4 times before his cultivation would be exhausted, making it difficult for him to escape Long Jiaonan's chase. He also couldn't just keep staring at Long Jiaonan. For experts like Long Jiaonan, her senses were extremely sharp and could most probably follow his gaze to find his location. Long Jiaonan was still slowly wearing her clothes with her back facing Qin Mu. Suddenly fine goosebumps appeared on the skin of her neck as she chuckled. "You're staring at my neck. Does my neck look nice?" Qin Mu's pupils contracted as the area of goosebumps on Long Jiaonan's neck gradually shrank. She had already confirmed Qin Mu's exact location. Qin Mu raised his clothes and an explosion sounded out beside his ear. His figure vanished in the divine art explosion. Long Jiaonan's shirt was half-buttoned, and she quickly retracted her palm back. The huge snake carried her and slithered at its fastest speed, yet they didn't find any traces of Qin Mu. She suddenly raised her head and saw a person sprint frantically in the sky as he stepped on the air. "You can't run." The huge snakes under her feet spewed out a demon gas and rose into the air, chasing after Qin Mu. In mid-air, the two of them saw the sight in Heaven Wave City and was dumbstruck. They saw the city constructed on the mountain had already been completely demolished, and in its place, there was a sacrificial altar formed from blood and bones. Dutian Devil King stood on the sacrificial altar and was fighting 2 people. One of them was the Dragon King of Dragon Rider sect, who was with his Flood Dragon, while the other people was a cult master-level existence at the Divine Bridge Realm. These 2 people were in great danger and could be killed by Dutian Devil King anytime. The devil language coming out from Dutian Devil King's mouth was much more profound than the devil language Qin Mu used to summon him. Above Heaven Wave City, the sky was spiraling and warping. Suddenly, thunder rumbled and lightning struck as the sky got ripped open and faintly showed a space of darkness. In that dark space, there seemed to be something moving, and suddenly, a bogeyman with 2 heads and 2 eyes flew out from the vortex that was spinning crazily. The bogeyman stopped in the air and gave 2 shouts towards the vortex. Buzz! Numerous black spots spew out from the vortex and covered the entire sky in a piece of black as they rushed towards Heaven Wave City. Those were the heavenly devils of Dutian. 10 of thousands of heavenly devils were pouring in from Dutian, and the heavenly devils were killing one another. Their corpses fell from the sky like rain and accumulated on the sacrificial altar, causing the sacrificial altar in Heaven Wave City to grow even larger. Blood rain started to fall from the sky. There were also some heavenly devils that had higher positions holding scepters as they descended from the sky. They landed on the sacrificial altar in Heaven Wave City and chanted an ancient and abstruse devil language as they surrounded the sacrificial altar. Countless magnificent runes instantly appeared in the sky above the sacrificial altar, which was incomparably bright. I might have created a disaster even greater than paralyzing the entire Imperial College. Qin Mu thought to himself as the corner of his eyes twitched. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 189. A Wooden Chest. Long Jiaonian also hesitated for a moment, and the vortex, which was currently above Heaven Wave City, had already become a passage to another world. The heavenly devils that swarmed out from the vortex were getting stronger and stronger, and the heavenly devil horde flooded in from the sky. Leave, my people of Ardutian. Leave the crumbling dark world of ours and head for the new world. Dutian Devil King stood on the sacrificial altar and opened his 8 arms to welcome the heavenly devils that were descending down while shouting with a world-shaking voice. Come, my people. This new world isn't desolate like Dutian. There are beautiful women, endless food, and the people guarding this world are all weaklings. Let us trample on them. Long Jiaonan saw her own father was already under the feet of this devil king. Even the flood dragon that her father had raised laid on the ground, unable to move. Meanwhile, the other existence of the cult master level was already beheaded. His head was plucked off by Dutian Devil King, who was raising it high up in of his hand. Is Dragon Rider sect really going to be finished? Sorrow swept through her heart. The heavenly devil horde in the sky fell like rain and attacked the soldiers that were escaping in all directions. Qin Mu was also blasted out of the sky and fell to the ground with a few thumps. 6 to 7 heavenly devils crashed down around him and gradually stood up. Qin Mu was no stranger to the heavenly devil horde. He had traveled through great ruins with village chief at night and met the heavenly devil horde when he was searching for Carefree Village, and he had also killed quite a number of them. The body of these heavenly devil horde was strong and grew in all shapes and sizes, which was different from humans. Furthermore, they cultivate devil chi and was proficient in close combat and spells. Their divine arts are queer but not as intricate as humans. When these heavenly devils just landed, Qin Mu flashed to the side of a heavenly devil and raised his knife and beheaded this heavenly devil. He then dodged the scorpion tail of another heavenly devil, the jet black tail nearly hooking onto his neck. Qin Mu stabbed his fingers forward and Junior Protector's sword pierced through the scorpion tail, which the heavenly devil had yet retracted. With his other hand executing heavenly devil freedom madra, he pulled the soul of a heavenly devil which was closing in on him out of his body, shattering the soul into pieces. Yuna La! A cow-head heavenly devil pointed at him and shouted, Yuna La! My abiyu lu ji now didi nua jia hong? Warrior, I want to challenge you. Come, bring it on. Qin Mu shouted, and his vital chi burst forth as he executed Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. That cowhead heavenly devil bellowed and rushed over with quick steps while dragging a huge and long knife that was 10 yards long. The blade of the knife was in contact with the ground, thus sparks flew as he dragged it over and slashed it down at Qin Mu with a sudden shout. Right at this moment, a huge snake crashed down from the sky and crushed the cowhead heavenly devil into broken pieces. Long Jiaonan controlled the huge snake to land on the ground, and with the snake's tail sweeping horizontally like a huge iron pillar, she managed to overwhelm and crush dozens of heavenly devils that came for her. Qin Mu instantly fleeted away, and as Long Jiaonan was about slaughter towards him, countless heavenly devils descended from the sky. Even though her cultivation had surpassed Qin Mu by 2 to 3 realms, she was still caught up in a bitter struggle. Qin Mu was also caught in an ambush. Hu Linger immediately summoned a tornado that revolved around them, but there were still heavenly devils who could rush into the tornado and pounced at them. More and more heavenly devils poured in from another world and looking from afar. They were like countless flies flying down from the sky, hiding the sky and covering the earth. Patriarch said, I must be able to settle disaster created by myself. It seems that I can't settle it this time. Cold sweats broke out on Qin Mu's forehead. Suddenly, bright lights suddenly came from the south and the lights were moving in the sky, lighting up the entire land. The lights grew brighter and brighter as they moved from the south. Wherever the light passed by, countless of heavenly devils would fall from the sky without their heads. Qin Mu raised his head to take a look and was shook. Those lights were sword groups. Sword groups formed by countless swords. It was impossible to count exactly how many swords there were. Meanwhile, in the middle of the sword groups, there were thousands of sword pellets that were still whirling continuously. The sword pellets were like moons, and as they spun, flying swords flew out continuously and killed all the heavenly devils in the sky with all kinds of sword forms. The sword groups were simply too vast. The light given off by each sword was all very dazzling, and there was probably a few million swords here. With all the light gathered together, it was truly a magnificent sight. Even though the heavenly devils from Dutyin hid the sky and covered the earth in a piece of black, the sky soon cleared up once again after the dazzling sword groups swept them, leaving just countless corpses falling from the sky. In Heaven Wave City, Dutyin Devil King's expression changed hugely and gave a bellow. He sped up the process to summon his true body over, and the 100 of heavenly devils' voices around the altar became incomparably loud and clear, using the devil language and countless corpses to summon the true body of Dutyin Devil King. The air trembled violently as a huge foot stretched out from another world. There were devil flames burning around this feet which burned the sky scarlet red. The sword groups in the sky suddenly changed their directions and whistled towards Heaven Wave City. The scale of the sword groups was almost as huge as Heaven Wave City. In the city, Dutyin Devil King roared in anger as he raised his 8 arms. With a hum, a huge black barrier appeared in the sky above Heaven Wave City, covering the entire sky. In an instant, countless ear-piercing noises sounded out, causing countless people to bleed from their ears. That was the sound when the flying swords collided with the black barrier of Dutyin Devil King. The clanging noises practically burst forth all at the same time, therefore no one's ears could withstand the sound. Qin Mu was also deafened and couldn't hear any sounds. Countless heavenly devils around him were also covering their ears and squatting on the floor in an unbearable pain. In Martial Order County on the opposite shore, countless Eternal Peace's soldiers were guarding against the invasion of the heavenly devil horde, and everything was in complete confusion. The noises given off from the collision between the sword lights and the dark barrier had also caused an extreme pain to the countless soldiers here. However, since the distance was much further, it was still bearable for them. Plopping sounds came from the river surface. It was from those heavenly devils flying to the opposite shore who were getting blown out from the sky, falling into the river. In the city tower of Martial Order County, a white-haired old general gave off an expression of astonishment. Imperial Preceptor, a great expert, has gone to the opposite shore. Duke Wei, this man is not only a great expert. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor stood in the front and gazed at the situation across the river. His ability is not far from mine. He's even stronger than the 3 old monsters that ambushed me back then. Duke Wei gave off a puzzled expression. He sized up the sword groups that were contending against Dutyin Devil King and looked at the true body of Dutyin Devil King in the sky, which already had half of his leg in this world, while asking puzzledly, who had summoned this Devil King? Isn't this a little too much? Have these fellows of the southern borders really stooped so low just to obtain victory? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor shook his head. With me around, Dutyin Devil King will not be able to descend into this world. On the contrary, the one who summoned this devil god had done a great merit for our eternal peace. Isn't Heaven Wave City just destroyed like that? Our soldiers will not have to bleed. If it was me, I will also choose to do this for the lives of our soldiers. Duke Wei sighed. Imperial Preceptor, this is why they don't understand you and said you're following the devil path. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor walked out of the city tower and headed towards Heaven Wave City on the opposite shore with a smile. The reason they said that was because I had affected their interests. My merits and demerits are not what the current people can evaluate. Only the people of hundreds and thousands of years later can judge my merits and demerits. Furthermore, in my eyes, they're already dead. In Heaven Wave City, Dutyin Devil King gave a dull grunt. The flesh on his 8 palms became messed up. The attack of the countless swords was simply terrifying. He was unable to endure the strength coming from them. If his true body came forward, he could naturally endure it, but this body was merely transformed from wood. Qin Mu had summoned him with his devil voice, but Qin Mu's strength was too weak. The energy he could transfer over through Qin Mu was too little and wasn't enough to contend with the strong practitioner that was controlling countless of flying swords. At this moment, he saw a middle-aged man walking over from the other side of the river. Dutian Devil King felt a fear in his heart and was about to exert out a little strength when he suddenly saw a sword light flying straight to his face. How breathtaking was this sword attack! This sword attack contained an extremely profound principle in the sword path, unleashing the murderous desire of the transforming sword path to its fullest extent. It was like revealing an extremely fine painting in front of his eyes. To be able to see this painting, he could die without regrets. So he died. His head was severed by this sword light, and the head that grew 4 faces and 12 eyes rolled from his neck. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor retracted his sword and walked up to Heaven Wave City. The heavenly devil horde in the city was still taking charge of the sacrificial altar. When they saw this middle-aged man, God knows how many heavenly devils immediately swarmed forward, pouncing at Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. What followed next was the collapse of Dutian Devil King's huge corpse. That black barrier also shattered and disintegrated in the air. The countless flying swords attacking the black barrier suddenly moved back and returned into the sword pellets. In the sky floated thousands of sword pellets, each of which was the size of a thumb, rotating around and around. At this moment, a chest flew over from far away and the lid of the wooden chest opened up. The countless sword pellets flew back into the wooden chest with tinkling and thumping sounds. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor looked at that wooden chest and seemed to be deep in his thoughts as he stood there motionlessly. Without anyone to take care of the sacrificial altar, that hair-raising summoning came to a stop and the growing vortex in the sky immediately stopped growing before gradually shrinking. The true body of Dutian Devil King already had a leg in and was forced to pull back his leg. An extremely unwilling and angry roar faintly came from the depths of the sky. Outside Heaven Wave City, Qin Mu was also raising his head to look at the wooden chest in midair and revealed a suspicious look. This chest looks very familiar. It seems to be the one in the smithy in the village. That wooden chest was also filled with silver-colored pellets. Granny C even told me those weren't sword pellets and were ordinary silver pellets. She even said Grandpa Mute wouldn't be so rich. He saw every single one of the sword pellets enter the wooden chest. The wooden chest gradually fell down and he immediately sprinted to the place where the wooden chest was landing at. That wooden chest descended down and vanished in a piece of forest. Qin Mu rushed over and saw an elder in cotton clothing who was carrying a furnace for forging on his back. On his hand was a wooden chest and hardships could be seen all across his face. Those were the wrinkles left behind by time. When the elder in cotton clothing saw him run over, he gave a wide grin and there was no tongue in his mouth. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 190. My Elder. Grandpa Mute. Qin Mu immediately hurried over and opened his arms to hug that elder in cotton clothing. He wanted to hug him up, but this elder was like the heaviest mountain in the world and he was unable to lift him up at all. Qin Mu laughed in excitement and exerted all his strength, but he was still unable to hug him up. Mute gave 2 AHS and placed the chest down. Qin Mu was finally able to hug him up and spun 2 rounds before throwing this elder to the ground. Mute landed on his butt and stood up to pat the dust off his butt. He gave 2 signals which meant you were too naughty. Grandpa Mute, why have you left the village as well? How come you're here? Qin Mu was surprised and delighted as he asked rapidly, You were so powerful just now. Are the sword pellets in the chest forged by you? Who else has come with you? Ah. As Mute made noises, he did hand signs as well. His eyebrows formed a board shape and put his palms together beside his face to act like he was sleeping before suddenly stretching 2 fingers out to make a walking shape. His hands signed rapidly and his expression also changed a few thousand times in a breath's time, dazzling Qin Mu's eyes. Grandpa Mute, slow down. I can't follow you. Where's Grandpa Deaf? Why didn't he follow you? Mute revealed a pleased expression and signed for a while. He meant he had sneaked out of the village secretly and didn't tell anyone. Qin Mu blinked his eyes and smiled. You don't know? I met Grandpa Butcher and Grandpa Blind, and also Granny C. They had already left the village. Mute was astonished and gave 2 chuckles. He raised his wooden chest towards Qin Mu, signaling for him to help carry the chest. Qin Mu sneered and didn't stretch his hand out. Grandpa Mute, don't try to fool me. This chest is very heavy. There are a few thousand sword pellets inside, right? Your sword pellet is very heavy and your chest is even heavier. If I help you carry it, I will definitely dislocate my shoulders and fall to the ground. I was tricked the previous time and I won't be tricked again. Mute grinned mischievously and gave Qin Mu a thumbs up. In disabled elderly village, other than Cripple who would tease Qin Mu the most, Mute was next. Suddenly, Mute raised his eyebrows and looked behind Qin Mu. Qin Mu also hurriedly looked back and saw a middle-aged man walking over. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor quietly walked to the front of them and stopped over a dozen yards away from them. A person of the previous generation? He asked gently. Mute grinned and made a few hand signs. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor frowned as he didn't understand. Qin Mu explained to him, Imperial Preceptor, Grandpa Mute meant he wasn't a person from the previous generation. He was still considered young. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor frowned again. Kept him feel uncomfortable that he couldn't understand the Mute and had to rely on Qin Mu to translate it for him. Dao Brother has an extraordinary ability, but what you cultivate isn't sword skill. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor sighed ruefully. I had interacted with a few people of the previous generation and learned quite a bit. I thought I had seen all kinds of divine arts, paths and skills, yet never would I expect to see a unique divine art like this. Can Dao Brother let me experience your divine art? Qin Mu was astonished. He saw Mute attacking just now with countless sword pellets soaring into the sky and turning into endless flying swords, forcing even Dutian Devil King having no choice but to defend yet was still injured by his swords. Qin Mu had thought Mute's skill was all on swords, yet Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said what Mute cultivated wasn't sword skill. Could Mute's ability be above the sword skill that he had exhibited? In the village, what Mute had taught him was the path of forging. Qin Mu still carried around a huge hammer frequently, and his hammer skills were taught by Mute. Could Grandpa Mute be cultivating hammer skills? Mute grinned and fastened the furnace on his back. He placed down the wooden chest in his hands. His appearance now was like a traveling blacksmith, taking a break at whichever village he arrived at to help forge ironware for the villagers. His chest was like a chest used to store tools for forging, and the items coming out from the chest shouldn't be sword pellets but something like a hammer, anvil, filter funnel, iron ladle, etc. He opened the chest and gave a few more hand signs. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's expression turned stiff and looked at Qin Mu. Qin Mu said, Grandpa Mute says his skill is almost lost to the world. It's fine if Imperial Preceptor wants to take a look. He wants Imperial Preceptor to find a suitable successor for him. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor felt deep veneration and said, Dao Brother is actually willing to impart the consummate skills of your life to others. Your breadth of mind far surpasses those cult masters, sect masters of those reputable and big sections. If fate allows, I'll keep an eye out for Dao Brother. The wooden chest was opened and inside it were countless sword pellets. Each sword pellet was the size of a thumb. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor gave a puzzled look and Mute smiled. He stretched out his palm and the sword pellets were suddenly not silver pellets anymore. They had instead liquefied and turned into something that was like water yet was like light. It gave people the feeling that it was a water transformed from light. This chest of sword pellets had turned into a chest of liquid light. The liquid light then slowly rose from the chest and crawled on Mute's body, spreading throughout his entire body like a silver armor. Qin Mu and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor immediately saw all kinds of strange markings appearing on the armor's surface. Those were strange rune formations that were mainly in charge of the defense. The liquid light then flowed down from Mute's body and turned into a huge bell in midair. It was dozens of yards tall, and the wall of the bell was very thin, as if it could be see-through. The huge bell slowly spun, and incomparably ancient characters appeared on the wall of the bell. There were also pictures of all kinds of strange beasts, as well as the arrangement of the stars in the full scope of the heavens. Swoosh! The huge bell transformed into flowing light, and a silver dragon appeared and circled around them. As the dragon moved, dragon markings covered its entire body. Suddenly the silver dragon rose into mid-air and turned into a long sword which soared into the sky, executing profound sword moves. The sword light suddenly retracted and a huge shield came descending down from the sky. Before the huge shield landed on the ground, It turned into a silver umbrella and slowly floated down while spinning. The sword pellets in Mute's chest actually had countless changes. It could turn into any weapons and any treasures of any use. The treasure in this chest of his could even transform into the form of divine arts. It was also Qin Mu's first time to see Mute executing his true abilities, and it was also his first time to see such a miraculous ability. Mute didn't teach this ability to him, and he had never seen Mute executing this kind of ability in the village as well. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was spellbound. Suddenly, the liquid light flowed over and transformed into a silver boat, and Mute threw his chest onto the silver boat before jumping up onto it. He grinned at Qin Mu and waved his hand as the silver boat broke through the air at an extreme speed and vanished without a trace. Qin Mu opened his mouth and wanted to call him back, but after thinking, he didn't say a word. After a moment, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor let out a stale breath and exclaimed, "Superb ability, superb ability. There's still an ability I haven't ever seen before in this world. This Dao brother is remarkable. Imperial Academician, you know him?" Qin Mu said, "He's my elder." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was stunned and didn't understand the meaning of this sentence. Could it be the experts of Heavenly Devil Sect? Other than Grand Chancellor, there's actually such an expert in Heavenly Devil Cult? Simply remarkable, as expected of the number 1 sacred ground of the Devil Path. Qin Mu shook his head. Imperial Preceptor guessed wrongly. I was born in great ruins, thus my home is in great ruins. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was astonished and looked at him deeply before saying meaningfully, Imperial Academician actually came from a powerful family with profound studies. Qin Mu was stunned for a moment and nodded his head reluctantly. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor then asked indifferently, in that case, who was the one that had summoned this devil god? I have no idea as well. Qin Mu said with a straight face, I've also just reached this place and came across such a huge chaos. I'm also so wronged, nearly died here. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor nodded his head gently and said, Gulinwan asked you to lead a team of scholars out here for experience. From what I know, your destination should be Lizho. This is Heaven Wave City and Martial Order County is on the opposite shore, which is 70 miles away from Lizho. Why is Imperial Academician here? About this. Qin Mu pulled out Hu Linger from his backpack and looked at this little white fox. Hu Linger raised her paws and nibbles on her claws. Her eyeballs rolled rapidly and her eyes suddenly lighted up. We had floated down from surging river. We encountered danger in Lizho as the remnants of Great Mountain Sect summoned a devil god. Therefore we had escaped out from the river. Young master, is this explanation okay? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, without a change in expression. You can say whatever you like. In this chaos of Heaven Wave City, there are countless deaths of the rebel army stationed in Heaven Wave City. The person who summoned the devil god had done a great merit. I prepare to recommend him to the Emperor and raise his official position. With this level of merit, the person could be raised to upper 4th ranking at the minimum. Qin Mu opened his mouth and Hu Linger immediately said, It's our young master who did it. Our young master had summoned this devil god called Dutian or something. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor ignored her and continued. There's merit, but since there were also countless of deaths of the commoners in the city, this sin is also huge. Even though death is unavoidable in the battlefield, there are too much deaths in wiping out a city. If I want to show off this person's accomplishment, there will definitely be contrarians in the imperial court criticizing that this person killed countless people, forcing the emperor to punish him. When the rebellion is quelled, scores will definitely be settled at an opportune moment and this person might be purged. I can't say if his whole family would be executed, but being stripped of the official position and exiled is definite. Hu Linger immediately shut her mouth and felt everything she said was wrong. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor gave a smile and said, Therefore I prepare to keep this merit under wraps and not say who did it. Without merit there's also no demerit. How does Imperial Academician think it that I handle it like this? Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief and said, Imperial Preceptor has handled it very well. Behind them, the army of Eternal Peace Empire had slaughtered all the Heavenly Devil Horde and a few generals came walking over. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor turned around and said indifferently, "Contrarians kill people by their mouths and not their hands. Even if you're able to escape for your life under the mouths of contrarians, it's still going to be a load of annoyance." Qin Mu said, "Imperial Preceptor has experienced it for yourself?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor nodded his head. "For my reform, I already killed countless contrarians, but there would be another wave of them coming out every time you kill a wave of them. They are endless to kill. They have no ability and don't do anything, yet they take huff at everything you do or say. The only thing they are good at is scolding you. Do you know what my end will be if my reform fails?" Qin Mu shook his head. "I will definitely be condemned by posterity for the next 10,000 years. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said indifferent. "Even if I succeed in my reform, I would also be scolded by the contrarians for the next hundreds and thousands of years. I once had a Tao friend who could console my heart." His expression turned dim. "But he has left. I miss him very much."